Hello, ladies and gentlemen, today is August 9th, 2026, and we are here to talk about the world, current events, foreign policy, economics, you name it, we'll talk about it in another episode of World Discussion with Agent Smith.
Hello. How are you
Sir,
today?
doing reasonably well. How about yourself?
Oh, can't complain. Anything exciting happen this week?
Yeah, my YouTube algorithm started feeding me geography videos, and I'm pretty excited to share some stuff with you.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I watched the new Demon Slayer movie, and it was pretty good. It's on Crunchyroll now, so if you still have that active, that's a thing you could watch if you wanted to. The animation for that is just super, super polished. It's not my favorite show in terms of the cast or the art style, but the just the level of detail and the colors and stuff of the fights. I don't think there's any other studio that's making as like high aesthetic execution anime. It just looks really, really good. Pretty good story. The movie adds to the show, so you probably want to be caught up with the show before you watch it.
I think I did watch the first season,
Gotcha.
although it's been a while. That was years ago, I guess. I don't even know how many seasons they have out now.
Also, because I was at a bit of a dead end in terms of watching anything, watching more of Berserk. That's one that was recommended to me, but I haven't really finished it. I think I had watched like 3 episodes, so I watched 3 of those yesterday. That is a very dark show. Lots of very intense suffering and morbid, gruesome death. That's what I would say. But the main character is fucking awesome. So, there's that.
Yeah, that's what I've heard about it. Never seen it myself, but I often see it referenced. It's generally regarded pretty well.
It has a very unique art style because it has a mixture of 2D and 3D. A lot of the combat stuff, the characters are 3D and sometimes they're against a 2D background. So I don't think I've seen any other show that has the same like artistic design as that one. But it's pretty good. Definitely very intense. Cool fights. I like the main character of Berserk is kind of unique among a lot of character types because you'll have a main character who's maybe a wizard or they're kind of a light weapons user. This guy uses a Zweihänder, the huge like German two-handed swords that you used to use to fight cavalry. And he just uses that all the time. And they do a good job with the acoustics of like when he hits stuff or slashes through people. It makes a really kind of heavy hitting sound where it's like both a blunt force weapon and a slashing weapon at the same time. So pretty cool fight design for that show. I like it. I don't really know about the depth of the story yet. It's kind of TBD. I don't know where it's going to go. But I was watching that. The geography stuff that I watched, it's just kind of random topics. I didn't search these. It was just suggested to me. One was about the southwest coast of Africa. There's a desert all along it, and it's just like really tall sand dunes, constantly moving sand dunes, no vegetation at all. And the guy was explaining why it's like that. There's a water current that goes from Antarctica directly along the west coast of Africa, and the water is so cold that when the sun shines in the day, it doesn't even heat it up enough for it to evaporate into the sky and then fall as rain onto the African continent. It just stays in the water. So there's almost no rainfall there. There's just some fog on the coast of West Africa in the south. And very few people, there are some local tribes that have lived there, just kind of being able to scavenge. That's kind of their main way of surviving. You can't really grow crops there, and it's really hard to build because the sand is constantly moving. But the Germans, whenever there was the kind of race to claim land in Africa, they found diamonds there. So there were some like super bougie German mining towns that are now covered in sand. They look really cool because it's like old school, wealthy European settlement in a very alien kind of landscape. But as soon as World War One concluded, all of the administration there collapsed. So they're just
Yeah.
abandoned German mining towns in the Namib Desert. And then I found, and then he was saying that they made a deal with the De Beers Mining Corporation or whatever, where the Namib government takes half and then the diamond company takes half. So they're harvesting diamonds there and they have really strict security for extracting them. But that's one of the, I think, primary sources for diamonds in the world is that region. But compared to a lot of other parts of Africa that are really lush, that's a extremely desolate region, maybe one of the most on Earth.
Yeah. Did they mention prevailing winds at all?
Maybe it related to the fog, but I don't recall.
Hmm. I had never heard about the water temperature being a factor. It's interesting. But yeah, it is very, very arid. And the population is correspondingly very small. Most of that territory is Namibia. And I think the population there is maybe like 1 million, something like that. Let me check. 3.1 million. So very, very low, especially given how big the country is.
Yep.
And it was, at one point, part of the German Empire. And there actually are still Germans living there, although it's a very, very small number. I think most of them left after independence.
I wonder how hostile the locals felt, because I guess it depends on the way the colonies treated the locals and stuff. If there's any like long-standing cooperation, maybe some people stay, but if most people leave, if it was a extractive colony, they're oftentimes not very nice to the locals because they don't care about making a cultural impression and starting their own economy there. It's more about like get all the good stuff as fast as we can and then leave, basically.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. One of the first major genocides of the 20th century happened in Namibia, specifically because of German colonialism there.
Well, I can see why they would be upset then.
Yeah. Yeah, they went pretty hard on the natives, especially when they got restless. And it's not like there was a whole lot there to begin with, so it wasn't very hard. Yeah, I think after, what was it? After World War One, it was given to the British and became part of the British Empire. And then I think what they did, I don't remember the exact timeline, but at some point they actually gave it to South Africa. It was not formally a part of South Africa per se, rather, it was a mandate territory. Basically, the UN gave responsibility for running and protecting Namibia to the South African government. And they actually held it for several decades, I think, until the 90s. I want to say like mid 90s is when they got independence. Mid 90s. 1990. There it is. So yeah, South Africa maintained a strong presence there for a long time, economically and in terms of military assets. Yeah, the country immediately north of Namibia is Angola, and Angola had been part of the Portuguese Empire. And starting in the mid 60s, there was a revolution there by native nationalists who were trying to expel the Portuguese. And in 1975, they succeeded. And Angola, after that, descended into civil war between different factions. But the most powerful one was the one that was aligned with the Soviet Union, which the South African government was not thrilled by, as you can imagine. So the South African government actually intervened in the Civil War, not necessarily in a big way, but they did at one point send a expeditionary force into Angolan territory, which was actually then defeated by a joint Cuban-Angolan force. Yeah, the history of Cuba and the Cold War is very interesting, but the point here is that they launched that expedition from Namibian territory. And the other cases of South Africa intervening in the conflict and projecting force into the conflict also happened largely in Namibia. So there's actually a fair bit of action in Namibia during the Cold War on that count. Never really much happening in it, but lots of stuff happening near it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's in a, at least from a naval capacity, a strategically relevant location, because if you're trying to go from west to east, that's the way that you go.
Yeah.
So definitely a valuable thoroughfare to account for. The other geography thing that I saw was on Bermuda. And Bermuda is in the Atlantic Ocean, and it's pretty far from the Caribbean, but the Gulf Stream from the Gulf of Mexico provides a lot of warm water. Once again, a water theme for reasoning why something is nice and tropical, but Bermuda is very tropical even though it's pretty far north. But it has almost no natural resources at all, and it has no natural sources of water. There are no lakes or rivers on it. It's really small as well. So the Spanish were the first to discover it and kind of put it on the map, but they didn't like it or care for it because there was nothing of value for them there. But the British then were in a situation where there was a ship that was about to wreck, so they landed there instead and then rebuilt 2 ships out of it and kind of figured out how to just harness rainwater, and then decided that they wanted to use the timber there to make more ships, and kind of just kept a colony there with some people that they volunteered to leave behind. But the economy now, it's a very, very high economy place relative to the population. I think it's $100,000 average income for each person, so very, very high, but it's a tax haven, so a lot of the wealthy are naturally attracted there just to save themselves a bunch of money. And they deal with a whole bunch of hurricanes and stuff because they're kind of in the prime line of fire from the Gulf Stream going through the Atlantic. And they have a huge amount of money in the reinsurance market. So whenever insurance companies have to pay out for catastrophes all at once, they usually have insurance somewhere else to kind of give them a buffer for that. And a lot of that money, I think most of the world's money for that, is in Bermuda.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. So small place, but relatively large global impact for what they do.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot of Bermuda history or politics. It's one of those quiet territories that's not in the news much. I do know that the Brits do love their tropical tax havens. They've got a number of them.
What are some of the other ones?
Have you ever heard of the Cayman Islands?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of them. I think they got another one in the Indian Ocean somewhere.
Yeah, places to keep your shady money.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that they leaned on that after World War II. because their financial sector wasn't in great shape after the war, losing ground to the Americans. So one of the ways they generated revenue was by deregulating, creating tax havens. That helped them out a little bit.
What are the downsides of doing that?
Of just creating tax havens.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's not really a whole. It kind of depends on how you do it, I guess. Because if you're just creating like lower tax areas, then you're basically just trading off tax revenue. Somebody else is getting slightly less, and you're getting slightly more. But if you're really going all in and doing like Swiss style anonymity and other stuff like that, the downside is that you're kind of enabling varying degrees of shady behavior because people will launder money basically in jurisdictions where they can do that. Anonymity is very valuable. Having very liberal laws on shell companies and whatnot, all of that facilitates the moving of money that has been acquired through one or the other illicit means.
So it seems like you're mainly soaking your ethics. Like that's your dump stat.
Yeah, it's not very ethical. It can create problems if the crime that you're encouraging is happening on your territory. But even if it's not happening on your territory, it is happening on somebody else's, and that can have knock-on diplomatic effects, depending on how bad the misbehavior is. A good chunk of it, if I remember correctly, is illicit money taken, well, embezzled, basically, from the budgets of developing country governments. So corrupt leaders of one kind or another will embezzle money, and then they'll move it offshore to try to secure it. And generally, they prefer tax havens to do that in, because then they can ensure safety, security, anonymity, etc., all the stuff they need in order to ensure they don't get caught or have to face any consequences.
Yeah, and they're just kind of in the department of they won't ask. They're not going to ask what you do or where your money comes from. That's just we keep your money secure and we don't talk about it. So, yeah, if you don't care about having potential blood on your hands, or in the case of corrupt officials embezzling money, that's basically taking money away from people who deserve it in other places. So other people are getting stolen from, basically. If they, say, voted in a bill where it says we have a $1 billion infrastructure project and it costs this much to do it, and you're one of the higher ups of this deal, and you take a couple $100 million off the top for yourself, the project is going to suffer for that. And the people are paying you more than they realize. They didn't plan to pay you that much, but you're taking that much. So you're risking your career, and you're also robbing people. So yes, yeah, tax havens just deal with that. How did the quality of life for people, if you live in one of these tax haven places, do you suffer at all, or is it just rich people who choose to live there?
I mean, it's well, I guess it depends on the tax haven, but in general, yeah, they do well because it is a major economic driver for the local economy. So even if you're not necessarily directly benefiting per se, the knock-on effects of more economic activity generally do benefit you. Higher property values, higher wages, stuff like that. So yeah, it's not just to the lawyers and whatnot who are making all the money from it. The local communities do benefit from higher tax revenue, more infrastructure spending, stuff like that. But the main beneficiaries are, of course, the people who are stealing shit.
Yeah.
They're getting the most out of that deal.
I see. Well, that makes me less interested in getting involved in that kind of venture.
Well, you say that, but you also haven't ever been president of a developing country, Neuro.
That's true.
You may change your mind.
You never know.
Well, lots of opportunities to steal shit. And just as many people willing to enable you.
Yep.
What was the other one? Namibia?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remembered something else about Namibia. It had to do with the Namibian government being upset about all of the atrocities that were committed during the colonial era.
Mm-hmm.
And they've actually been in off and on negotiations with the German government to pay reparations. I don't think they've gone anywhere. I think there was supposed to be some kind of deal a couple of years ago, but the Namibian government wasn't entirely happy with it, as I recall. Yeah, various German governments have had to kind of deal with that. I think they're concerned about setting a precedent.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to be on the hook financially for any and every atrocity that was committed during the German Empire.
And that was what time period before World War One?
Yeah, it would have been before World War One, so roughly like 1880s to 1914. Well, 1918, I guess, technically. But yeah, I remember reading about that maybe like 5 years ago, whenever it was. Just kind of flares up every now and again.
Mm.
It's just one of those running adjutants in the relationship between Germany and Namibia. Yeah, actually, I think that's what it was. They had some kind of arrangement regarding green energy. Yeah, I think the German government rather, was trying to set up a green hydrogen scheme, basically where there would be a bunch of solar farms set up in Namibia. And the electricity from that was supposed to assist in some way in the development of green hydrogen that would be used in Germany. The German government was very interested in developing hydrogen technology as an alternative for gasoline and other fossil fuels. Used to be a lot of countries doing that over the past 10 years, but in recent years, it's become apparent the technology is kind of limited. So there's been much less interest more recently. But yeah, I think that German agreement with Namibia was a part of a broader agreement that did encompass reparations. So it was kind of they were kind of trying to kill two birds with one stone with that. But I don't think the Namibian government was entirely willing to have that agreement be the reparations. They wanted like full cash payments, and the German government was not willing to do that. Only concessions regarding green energy. That was what they were most interested in. So that was kind of the quid pro quo. We'll help fund the development of green hydrogen and solar farms and whatnot. And in exchange, you will consider that reparations. And the Namibian government wasn't really interested in conceding ground on the reparations, but they were quite happy to accept investment money. And I think that was basically what they ended up making the crux of the deal. Yeah, I haven't heard anything about that project since, so I don't really know its status.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. It was a country I never really learned too much about. A lot of the small population countries have a maybe unique history, but you just don't hear of it because they don't have that many people. So
yeah, they're not in the news that much. They generally don't have a lot of strategic resources. They're just kind of out of the way and fall by the wayside in the news. Back page type stuff, generally, if even that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from
You ever
what I
heard of bots?
understand, hydrogen
Go
energy, just before we move on from that, um, I think it's not really that easy to optimize because you have to keep it so cold for it to work as liquid fuel. So you have to do a bunch of work, basically have a refrigerator on the car or whatever is using the hydrogen energy, which is pretty energy consuming on its own.
Well, what I read is that they have to keep it under enormous pressure, and that
Mm-hmm.
makes it difficult and expensive because you have to use special manufacturing techniques, materials, etc., in order to ensure that you can achieve the necessary pressure in the relevant tanks
Mm.
without making it so sensitive that it explodes every time you drive over a speed bump or something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's multiple problems with it. It's almost certainly not going to replace like internal combustion vehicles or electric vehicles or what have you. The use case that I've seen explained as the most viable was heating for manufacturing. They can substitute that for natural gas
Mm.
in some cases. Not quite what the German government wanted, but it'll do. It's better than nothing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Given their problems with natural gas supplies over the past 5 years, I'm sure they'll take anything they can get. Well, I was going to ask, have you ever heard of Botswana?
Yes, it's another country in Africa.
Yeah, it's directly to the east of Namibia. That's another one of those very arid countries with a very small population you don't hear about very much.
Mm.
It's actually pretty successful. I think it's got one of the highest GDP per capitas in Africa, although a lot of that is just like diamond mining, stuff like that. From what I've read, the government does a relatively good job of actually investing the proceeds from that trade in the country. I think it used to be a mandate territory too, that was run by South Africa for a while, but I think they got their independence much earlier than Namibia did,
Mandate means it was assigned to them by Britain.
the, by the UN specifically. Although, like, pretty much through London, yeah, that would have been probably the genesis of it. But the legal side of it was UN. They went through the UN to justify it and legalize the transfer. Yeah, Botswana independence was 1966, so a couple decades earlier than Namibia. But it was still very much in the South African sphere of influence. Most of the mining companies operating there were South African. Yeah, the only other thing I remember about Botswana is that it was hit really hard by AIDS. Had a really bad HIV epidemic there for a long time.
That's no good.
Yeah. But other than that, they do pretty well for themselves. Surprisingly so. Well, what else did we want to get to today?
The only thing that was mentioned to me was the deal between Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey.
Yeah, I saw that. They didn't really release a lot of details about the actual terms of the agreement, so there's not really much I can say about it.
Hmm.
Nominally, it's directed at Iran, but it's impossible to tell like how serious the agreement is without seeing the terms.
Mm-hmm.
It is technically a mutual defense agreement, but it's not clear if the terms of the agreement actually require anybody to do anything in the event one of the parties to the agreement is actually attacked. So it could just be one of those things where somebody gets attacked and then you express thoughts and prayers, and then that technically meets your obligation. Yeah.
But thoughts and prayers don't really help you formulate a defense against tanks.
They do not. So it could just be a symbolic agreement. It could just be Turkey and Pakistan trying to cultivate relations with a wealthy Arab state that has lots of money that it can spend on them. But it could be a serious attempt at building a regional security architecture. Like, again, we just don't know right now. At least not from what I've read thus far. I mean, for the Saudis, the motivation is pretty obvious. You know, clearly they're concerned about the Iranians, and they want to signal to the Iranians that if the Saudis come under attack, then they would have allies. Or even if they don't necessarily have allies, there's a chance they could have allies, depending on if Turkey and or Pakistan wants to actually honor the agreement. So even the uncertainty around that could be enough to provide deterrent value to Iranian aggression. Yeah, the Turks, on the other hand, I don't really know what their game plan is with this, because they're the regional heavyweight. They don't really have to worry about all this drama going on. It doesn't necessarily impact them all that much. It really doesn't challenge them or their national security. And they've kind of been rivals to the Saudis for much of the past 10 to 20 years. The Turkish government was much closer to the Qatari government, to the point where they were basically one of the three major factions fighting in the Syrian civil war for a while. The Saudis were definitely not in their camp. They were much more in the American camp. And they backed different factions in the civil war correspondingly. So for the Turks to kind of shift away from that, improve relations with the Saudis to the point where they're willing to sign a mutual defense agreement, that is quite the turnaround. Although, again, we don't know how serious it is exactly as of yet. But the fact that they would try at all signifies some degree of warming relations there. It seems they want to cooperate more going forward and be less confrontational.
It probably makes them feel nice to be asked to be a part of the group, though. I feel like regional hegemons enjoy that kind of stuff, especially if it's this sort of loose agreement that doesn't really hold them to really strict obligations, but makes them look strong.
Yeah. That's a good look. And building relations with the Saudis is kind of a good move in general, just because of how influential they are. I don't think the Turks are really all that threatened by Iran either. So I don't think that's a major impetus. If anything, they have reason to cooperate. They both have issues with separatist Kurds, although more so with Turkey's Kurds than Iran's Kurds. But given that they have the same problem, there's probably some degree of cooperation already. And for the Turks to kind of sign this agreement in any serious way would kind of jeopardize that. I don't know if Ankara really wants that. So probably I would expect, if I had to guess, which I do, the Turkish government is more interested in cultivating better relations with the Saudis and much less interested in actually confronting Iran, which makes me doubt the utility of the agreement. I suspect the terms are going to be pretty loose. Yeah, the Pakistanis are kind of in a similar boat. I don't know that they really have any reason to confront the Iranians. They don't really have that many problems. And kind of like with the Turks, they actually share a similar problem that the Iranians face. Both Pakistan and Iran have large ethnic Baluch minorities along their border region that are fighting for independence. So given that they're fighting the same separatist movements, it kind of makes sense to cooperate. Confrontation doesn't really help with that. But again, I imagine for the Pakistanis, the motive is similar to that of the Turks. You know, they want good relations with the wealthy, influential country in the region. That's probably worth sacrificing a little bit of diplomatic capital with Tehran.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably not even that big a sacrifice. Probably the Iranians know they're not all that serious about the defense agreement. Again, not to say it doesn't provide any deterrent value. Keep in mind, both Turkey and Pakistan share not insignificant borders with Iran. So, you know, if you're Iran and suddenly you wake up one day to news that two of your neighbors have signed a defense treaty with the Saudis, it is going to be at least a little bit unnerving.
Yeah.
It is going to influence your decision making somewhat. But actually reading between the lines and looking at the background, I don't think the Iranians are going to be all that worried about, say, getting invaded on two fronts by Turks and Pakistanis.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind, the Pakistanis already had a defense agreement with the Saudis that the Saudis tried to activate during the hostilities with Iran recently. And the Pakistanis responded by kind of slow dripping troops into Saudi territory. But I don't think they ever gave any signal that they were willing to like attack Iran or anything like that. The deployments seemed to be mostly symbolic. So I suspect this agreement is going to be pretty similar. We'll see. Yeah, I guess the significance of the agreement is that it illustrates that there is more of a desire by countries in the region to take more responsibility for their security. Partly because of Iranian aggression, partly because of American unreliability. There is a desire, correspondingly, to try to build a new security architecture that is mostly run by local actors and that is not dependent on foreign actors to maintain.
Makes sense.
And you can see some of that with the Israeli rapprochement with the Emiratis. They've kind of gone out of their way to cultivate that relationship, especially in recent years. But the Saudis don't really seem on board with that, so that's been mostly an Israeli Emirati thing. That has not really been expanded much beyond that. And the Saudis are taking a more dovish stance with the Iranians, especially recently. In fact, one of the reasons that there was a ceasefire ended up being a temporary ceasefire, but they did try it recently. The Trump administration met with some officials from Saudi Arabia, and the Saudis basically told them that they wanted to de-escalate. They were not interested in propagating the conflict with Iran, and so that apparently played a role in the Trump administration's decision to cease its airstrikes that had been ongoing for a week or so as part of a tit-for-tat escalation in strikes between Washington and Tehran. So the Saudis don't really like the Iranian government, and they've kind of run hot and cold on them in recent years. But the overall trajectory is towards reconciliation. They would prefer some kind of negotiated settlement to their differences that'll restore a degree of stability and peace to the region. They've been much, much less hawkish in that regard than the Emiratis have been. Somewhat ironically, the Saudi position in that regard is actually closer to the Qatari position, which has been very much open to negotiating directly with the Iranians and coming to some kind of agreement. Saudis and Qataris don't generally agree on much of anything, so that is notable.
We found a common cause.
Excuse me.
You're excused.
I've been very degenerate this week, so my sleep schedule is all askew.
I see. Night owl?
Yeah. I appreciate the peace and quiet of night.
Amen.
Just you and the internet as God intended.
Yep. Amen.
And let's see. I did have another note on Iran here. Somebody a couple weeks ago was asking about China's role in avoiding a global oil shock. Have you heard anything about this?
No.
Okay. So the Iran conflict started. The expectation was that the Strait of Hormuz would be closed and that there would be a global energy crisis that would see the price of oil skyrocket to like $150 a barrel, $200 a barrel, whatever. And it didn't happen. Certainly prices rose, but they've been relatively moderate rises compared to what markets have been expecting. So the question was, why? And apparently, a big part of the answer is China. The Chinese government, of its own volition, seemingly, has significantly curbed imports of oil from the Middle East. In fact, I read that it's basically zero now. So, given that China was a major source of demand for oil in the region, that obviously put significant downward pressure on prices. And they did this specifically in response to the conflict, it would seem. So that has served to foreclose the dramatic increases in prices that had been expected, with the knock-on effect that it has prevented a major global economic crisis. So the question is, why did they do that? Obviously, they would suffer economically if there were a global economic crisis. So that's the intuitive answer. But the Chinese government, interestingly, has not really said much about it. And so we kind of have to guess. Nobody's exactly sure. Even professional market analysts have basically had to resort to guesswork in theory about this. And it's also not really entirely clear how they're doing it, because their economy does need significant amounts of oil. And analysts had thought they had known how much oil they had in storage, and the official amount is not enough to go as long as they've gone without imports. And native oil production in China is not enough to be scaled up to replace all of their imports. So, kind of a mystery just how exactly they're pulling this off without a dramatic economic impact on their own country. Best guess is that they had more oil in storage than had been previously known. Again, just a guess, but that seems to be the consensus choice. It makes a lot of sense for Beijing to do it just from the economic perspective, but there's also a national security imperative. Obviously, if there were a conflict with the United States, the fact that China imports significant amounts of natural resources, up to and including oil, through strategic waterways like the Strait of Hormuz and also the Straits of Malacca, those are major strategic vulnerabilities for China, because in the event of a conflict, those can be choked off, with correspondingly dramatic impacts on the Chinese economy. So if you're the Chinese government and you know that's a possibility, it makes a lot of sense to hedge against that by trying to store as much of those strategic resources as possible, so that in the event of a conflict where you are cut off from seaborne imports, you have something in storage to act as a buffer to foreclose immediate dramatic impacts on the economy. So it may be that they built up a strategic reserve in secret that markets didn't know about, and that they've been tapping that in order to offset the potential damage to their economy from the conflict being waged between the United States and Iran. Not really any telling how long they can keep it up. Presumably, they're going to run out sooner or later, and when they do, if the Strait of Hormuz is still closed, we may actually yet have the aforementioned energy crisis. Something to look forward to.
More pain at the pump.
Oh, yeah. The worst yet if market expectations actually end up getting met. It'll be quite dramatic. One of the interesting explanations I read is that the Chinese government wants to signal to Washington that they can actually sustain this for a long period of time. And if they can prove that being cut off from seaborne trade is something they can tolerate for an extended period of time, that does provide some deterrent value to American aggression of one kind or another. It does illustrate that the United States maybe does not have as much leverage as it thinks from its command of the seaways. And that does have value. So it's probably multiple things. It's probably not like just a single motivating factor. It's probably the desire to avoid economic fallout. It's the signaling, etc. Maybe some other objectives we don't even really know about. Again, the party has been very cagey about it, perhaps unsurprising. But yeah, make sure to thank your local branch of the Communist Party of China. They have done the world a favor.
China has really deep and rich roots for how long they've had the area. I think, India and China are the longest continuous civilizations?
How do you want to define civilization?
Yeah.
There's a whole debate about that. Yes, China and India probably are the oldest civilizations, if you want to assume that civilizations in those territories have been continuous for the past, what would it be, like 4,000 or 5,000 years? But whether or not it's really continuous is kind of debatable. Especially nationalist groups are kind of butthurt about some periods where there were foreign invasions. There's not a few of them that consider that to be a discontinuity in terms of civilization. One of the debates I remember reading about on China's internet was whether Chinese people in northern China or southern China were the more authentic inheritors of Chinese civilization.
What? It's a weird distinction.
Well, Chinese civilization started in the north, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like close to the Yellow River, sort of in the Los Plateau and the Wei River. So that area is very much in northern China. So you could say, technically speaking, that northern China has more in common with the previous iterations of Chinese civilization, previous dynasties, etc. However, the counter argument is that when barbarians invaded China, they mostly invaded the north. And they actually did intermix with the natives there. So you could say, and this is the southern position, that the northern Chinese are actually not truly Chinese, but are rather our descendants of barbarians who invaded China. So their ancestry is suspect in that way, in the minds of southern Chinese. And there were a lot of Chinese living in the north who fled northern China when the barbarian invasions happened and relocated to the south. So the southerners say that these people who migrated south and who have been living in the south for centuries are actually more Chinese than the Chinese living in northern China. So they argue that genetically and culturally they are the more authentic. Anyway, that's just to illustrate that debates about civilization can get messy. It kind of depends on how you want to define civilization and whether or not the rise and fall of civilizations over time represents discontinuities or not. I think in general, people just assume that Chinese civilization has been around forever. Again, like 5,000 years, and that there's not really any substantive enough discontinuities to not argue it's the same civilization over that time period. But there has been admixture, there has been changes, there have been the injection of foreign ideas and genetics over time. And that has kind of muddied the water in the minds of some. Again, especially Chinese nationalists.
It sounds a little bit like a contest of who's the most Chinese of all of us, which is an interesting
Oh
contest.
yeah. Oh yeah. Nationalists love games like that.
Mm.
One of their favorite pastimes. There's not as much of that debate in India, just because India was always kind of multiple civilizations anyway. Like the Magadha civilization and sort of the Eastern Ganges, and then the Aryans, and then the Tamils in the south. So those are sort of different poles of civilization that all evolved at the same time and together and influenced each other and merged over time to create what we think of now as Indian civilization.
Mm.
And there's always been foreign invasions into South Asia, and that's not new. It's just kind of incorporated into the identity. South Asia is probably one of the most naturally and organically, but what's the word, cosmopolitan cultures on Earth, just because they have so much history of accepting large movements of people into their territory and incorporating them into existing cultural norms and practices of one kind or another. That's just kind of normal for them. So there's not as much drama and angsting over, who's the most authentically Indian, who has the most claim to the Indian identity. There's just been so much churn in South Asia over time. It's kind of a meaningless conversation. Doesn't stop people from trying,
Yeah.
but it's not as big a deal there as it is in a lot of other places. In so much as Indian nationalists like to complain, it's more about Islam. That's kind of their big deal.
Mm-hmm.
That's the ultimate in foreign ideologies for them. And they kind of want to exercise it from India.
It's interesting that this concept of a national identity is a little bit arbitrary, it feels like, because the designation of what China is has been a constantly changing blob over time, where the territory changes, the composition of the people changes, the leadership changes, the type of government changes. There's just a lot going on. There are migrations of people, there are departures of people, there are a bunch of people who die, whatever. There's just so much that changes over time that to call someone X, like someone Dutch or something, the Dutch got around, right? They went around the world. So anyone who even says they're Dutch, they probably got some other stuff in there. There are probably some people in the countries next to the Netherlands where they have a relative from or whatever. It's we're a lot more mixed than people are striving for. But it is very, very funny. A very nationalist thing to do is to try to find the ultimate of a type. They really like their types, and it seems like the whole tribalistic mindset really loves putting things into clear categories. Because then you have stuff you can love and stuff you can hate. It tells you a lot more about how you can see all the variety of humanity. But it takes a lot more mental effort to realize, okay, every person from a country is going to be working with some background from a whole bunch of different places in the world that have had a bunch of different names over time.
Mm-hmm.
And there were humans before China as well. So where did they come from? Because some people came to China. They were not always in China.
Yeah, it was originally much more diverse, but Han civilization basically just spread out and dominated everybody.
Mm.
Everybody got assimilated over the course of like 1,000 years or so. Yeah, it was kind of like a Rome. Like Rome was sort of the center of civilization, was more advanced than everybody else, except the Greeks anyway. And so Roman culture and civilization became the standard for much of the region, especially Europe. So in China's case, there wasn't even like a Greece, there wasn't an Egypt. They were very isolated.
Mm-hmm.
So you had this advanced urban civilization, and then they were surrounded by, peasants, nomads, what have you. Some rice cultivation, but not all that much in the grand scheme of things. So it was not hard for them to just steamroll everybody else and then have everybody think of them as the leading light of the region, if not the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just because of the logistic difficulty, there were a bunch of civilizations that considered themselves the peak of the world just because the other big civilizations were insurmountably far. It would
Mm.
take too long for a traveler to go from ancient China to ancient Rome and back. That's an incredible journey that would take years in one way, I think.
Yeah, I think it took Marco Polo, what, a year to travel the Silk Road? A
Mm-hmm.
year and change, something like that. And that was one way. Took him another year to get back.
Mm-hmm. That sounds really fun and also very high stress and uncomfortable at the same time. Because you
Oh,
never
yeah.
really get to settle down if you're constantly on the move. So, very exciting, but very exhausting.
Well, I'm sure he took breaks. He was probably trading along the way
Yeah.
because the Silk Road was not like it's not like you went from one end to the other, right? Well, obviously you go from. That's a poor way of putting it. um, you don't stock up on stuff at one end and then just take it all the way to the other end and sell it. You buy stuff at one end and then go to the next node in the network, sell that stuff, and then buy other stuff, and then you move on, and then you go from node to node until you get to the other side. So probably he bought stuff in Italy and then traveled to like Samarkand or something, or maybe even something even closer, sold off the stuff he bought, got new inventory, and then moved on, and then just did that over and over. And that was probably how he funded the whole expedition.
Mm.
And he actually hung out in China for a while, not entirely voluntarily. He actually traveled to China while the Mongols were in control of China. It was during the era of the Yuan dynasty, I think it was. And Kublai Khan was running the country then. And apparently he met Khan, and Khan took a liking to him and kind of voluntold him to stay on as a court advisor for something like a year.
That's funny.
Yeah, so he was not actually technically allowed to leave for a while. And it wasn't until later that he basically asked him very politely if he could go home that he was finally given permission. And something to that effect. I haven't read the story in a while. But he was eventually allowed to leave, and then he came back to Europe. Wrote a book about China that everybody thought was bullshit because it was just too. It was too out there for too many people. It was outlandish. That's the word I want. His descriptions of China at that time just seemed outlandish because China then was much more advanced than Europe,
Mm-hmm.
like miles ahead.
What
Europe
were
was
the
very
things
much
that
still,
they had that Europe did not?
like even some of the most basic shit, like modern, well, not modern, quote unquote, sanitation, but contemporary sanitation systems. Um, More advanced irrigation, more advanced, cleaner urban areas, larger urban areas. You know, China had big, big cities back then, much bigger than most anything in Europe. So altogether, it was just much wealthier, much more advanced technologically, and much more stable than anything in Europe at that time. And Europeans just thought that was crazy. Now, this guy must be lying his ass off.
Mm.
Mind you, it was not unusual for travelers to write outlandish stories in books that they wrote about their travels.
Yeah.
So Marco Polo just kind of sounded like one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so people kind of discounted his work for that reason. Probably wouldn't surprise me if he did kind of embellish things a bit, but given how well off China was at the time, he probably didn't have to embellish all that much to make people think he was lying.
Mm-hmm.
How did we get onto that?
Mm. Mm. China. How did we get to China? The oil stuff? Were we talking about
Oh, right, right. Yeah, it
energy
was,
conversation?
yeah, the China helping prevent an energy crisis. There we go. That's how we got there.
We
Well,
love
what
our
else did you
meandering answers in World Discussion with Agent Smith.
Thank you for indulging me. I apologize.
All good.
Well, was there something else you wanted to get to?
Bitter Sugar said he was down to do some Ukraine history at some point, just putting that out there.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
Definitely game for that. You can fact check me on all the stuff I talked about last week.
Yeah.
Tell me what an idiot I am. I'm sure I got something wrong.
Yeah, well, being proven wrong about stuff is just saving you for being wrong for the rest of your life. So it's a good thing.
There you go. That's a good way to think of it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess in that vein, I did have some corrections, so we could do that if you're game for that.
Sure.
If I can find them anyway. Oh, yes. Last time we talked a little bit about the PKK and how they have how the leader of the PKK has a cult of personality within the movement, or within the group. And I described him as Stalinist-esque. And apparently that was an influence, but somebody in chat pointed out that Öcalan was also heavily influenced by anarchism, much to my surprise. Hadn't heard that. And then that same person corrected me, or clarified anyway. There was a party in Turkey I was talking about last time, the name of which I could not remember, but it was the reformist party that was mostly supported by Kurds. And so that party is the HDP. So thank you for the corrections. Let's see. And then somebody else was asking about Poland in the interwar years. We talked a lot about the interwar years last time. And I mentioned that Poland at one point had taken a chunk of territory from Czechoslovakia, and that it was an act of aggression that isn't really much talked about, given that they were later victimized by Germany. It doesn't really receive that much attention. So somebody was asking for some more details about that. So let's see. I did try to look that up. Let me see what I've got here. So the territories they took were pretty small. They were not nearly as big as like the Sudetenland that the Germans took, or even the territories that Hungary got. But they definitely did make a play for some of those territories. Yeah, for some additional context here, the territories were disputed, and apparently the Czechs actually made the first move on them immediately after World War I. There was disputed territory, and the Czech government mobilized their army and sent them into the disputed territory. And they actually fought a brief war with Poland at that time. So even after that war ended, the territory remained disputed. And after Czechoslovakia was kind of neutered by Germany in the Munich conference, Warsaw made a play to get them back, and they were successful in doing so. I'm gonna embarrass myself and try to pronounce the territories. Transolza. That's my best effort. And then Cieszyn. I cannot for the life of me figure out the transliteration for Polish. I should probably just sit down with Wikipedia one day and just learn Polish transliteration.
I think Polish is famously difficult as well. Like I've seen people making videos of like really difficult to pronounce towns and stuff, the signs of it. So don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. Oh, also Northern Spiz and Northern Arawa. There's also a couple smaller territories that were also taken, but they were tiny. Not really worth mentioning per se. Yeah, the war in question was the Polish-Czechoslovak War, and the events that in which the territories were seized by Poland transpired in 1938.
Let's see.
Basically, shortly after the Munich Agreement and the First Vienna Award.
What's a Vienna Award?
That was basically Germany, in conjunction with some of their satellites, negotiating territorial transfers. So it was basically kind of like Munich Agreement, but unlike Munich, it didn't involve the West appeasing Germany. Germany basically did it with its allies in the region, and there wasn't really anything anybody could do about it. So, but yeah, Hungary did get some additional territory out of that. You could look at maps from like 1938, 39 in Europe, compare them to Europe like in 1930 or maybe sometime in the 20s, and you can see the territorial adjustments that were made in 38. They didn't last that long, so nobody really remembers them. But there definitely was a period where Germany, Hungary, etc., were carving up Czechoslovakia mostly. Made for kind of a funky Eastern European map.
I could see that.
Oh yeah, I did have some links here. Let me send those. I've got two maps that I pulled from Wikipedia that kind of illustrate the territory I'm talking about. Where are you? Neuro. And then this one. Yeah, Poland in the interwar years was governed by a dictator named Pilsudski. Again, that's my best effort on pronunciation. And he was pretty ambitious. He had visions of Poland as a regional power. He thought he could take a good chunk of Belarus, maybe Ukraine, and then use that territory to become not just a regional power, but a hedge against Russian aggression, or Soviet aggression, as was the case at the time. Didn't really pan out that much, but the guy was never lacking in desire to take additional territory. There were a number of wars in the 1920s over that. And as you can see in the 30s, he still took opportunities when they arose to expand. Well, that's all I had for corrections, so thanks to everybody for contributing there. Maybe that's a good cue for the usual disclaimer. I'm not an expert on everything I talk about on here, more painfully obvious at some times than others. So if I ever say anything wrong, stupid, or biased, please let me know. If I'm wrong, I want to know more than anybody. I don't read chat while we do this, but I will read it later, and we do enjoy the feedback we get on here, so participation is encouraged.
Thank you, chat. Well, is there a region of the world you want to hear about, chat? Or I guess it's been a fairly quiet week, not super crazy stuff.
Did I have stuff? Let me see. I mean, there's stuff going on with Iran, but it's basically just more of the same at this point. The Trump administration announced another ceasefire, and they're going to try to give diplomacy a chance because they think they're close. But I also saw them whining that the Iranians were not coming back to the table, so who the fuck knows at this point. I guess there was some stuff with Israel. the Trump administration did come out with a announcement that Hamas had allegedly agreed to lay down arms. I think we mentioned this last week. So the Trump administration was putting pressure on Israel to agree to his Board of Pieces plan, which involved Hamas disarming, but also involved Israel withdrawing from Gaza. And the Israeli government kind of hemmed and hawed for a day or two, and then they came out and just said, no, not doing that. Not surprising. I don't doubt that Washington is upset about it, but the Israeli government and the Netanyahu administration in particular has been very, very stubborn about actions that they perceive to be undermining their national security. Mm-hmm. Whether those things actually do or not is debatable, but when it comes to national security, Netanyahu prefers to have his way and very rarely is disappointed. So this is the latest iteration. It's possible the Trump administration could keep pressure on them to try to make them comply, but yeah, I'm skeptical it'll pan out for them. The Israelis have a way of kind of making it through these little tiffs that emerge in the relationship with the United States. But we'll see. This is still kind of a developing story.
I'm kind of wondering, is this a point in the U.S.-Israel relation where we have a very close tie, or it's very high conflict? Because it seems like we're working closely with them, but we're not on the same page with stuff.
You know, that's a very interesting question, and it's kind of difficult to answer. Because strategically speaking, they're still very tightly aligned. Like Israel is still very close with the United States in terms of things like intelligence sharing, military cooperation. You know, obviously we're basically fighting a war with them right now. However, diplomatically, the Israeli government and the American government have very different objectives in the region. You know, the American government wants peace and quiet, stability, etc. Its interests in the region are best served by everybody keeping their hands to themselves and minding their own business. The Israeli government is much more interested in building its security, because obviously the states in the region don't like it. They've been attacked in the past. They have this running issue with the Palestinians. So the Israeli government, to varying degrees in past decades, has sought to very actively and aggressively shape the security environment in the Middle East in as favorable a way as possible whenever opportunities arise to do so. And given the limited resources Israel has, they haven't been able to kind of force their will on the region, but they are powerful enough to take advantage of opportunities over time in a way that shapes the security environment. And nobody has been more aggressive in doing that than Netanyahu. He has been very belligerent in that regard over the past 10, 20 years or so. And that creates some tension with the United States. Because while the United States government in general officially recognizes the Israeli government's right to self-defense, which is how they generally frame whatever they do, be it self-defense or not, the American government would actually prefer if they kind of cooled it. Because they don't think the Israeli government is entirely justified in bombing Syria to try to create a buffer zone, or to go ham on the Palestinians in Gaza the way that they have. That kind of stuff is an irritant in the relationship, and that's to say nothing of the occupied territories in the West Bank. That especially is a running irritant. And the approach to dealing with it over the past 20 years has basically been to try to ignore it and downplay it. That's basically the path of least resistance. But with the Netanyahu government becoming as aggressive as it has in the wake of the October attacks a couple of years ago, we're kind of getting to a point where the tension and objectives between Washington and Jerusalem are getting to a point that can't be ignored anymore. And the Biden administration and the Trump administration have approached to dealing with that tension in different ways, both of which have been largely ineffective. But I don't think that augurs any kind of improvement in the relationship. If anything, it's going to augur a decline. And there's already significant public pressure in the United States to sever the relationship, or at least to significantly pressure the Israelis into changing their policy vis-a-vis the Palestinians in a certain way. And that pressure only looks set to grow. So between differing strategic objectives and growing public opposition to American cooperation with Israel, you could argue that while we are strategically aligned, that politically we're increasingly at odds. And at this point, you could argue the relationship is kind of on the rocks politically, and is in danger of faltering in the near future. I guess I should mention economically. Economically, Israel is also tightly integrated with the US. Yeah, lots of advanced firms there that are very successful, especially in the areas like tech. Military technology is another one. The US government kind of gives special treatment to Israeli companies, tends to trust them a little more and give them more access. The Israeli government is not entirely happy with that at this point. The Israeli government is privy to the fact that the relationship with the United States is not as reliable as it once was, and that the future there is not entirely sure. So the Israeli government has started thinking about curbing how much aid it accepts from the US government, since they would prefer to slowly wean themselves off rather than just rely on it and then suddenly find themselves without it one day. And they're also looking at joint projects with the US government in terms of developing certain defense technologies, rather than just buying exclusively from the United States. Because if they could do a joint project where they invest like half the money or whatever, then they have more claim to that technology, and there's less room for accusations from critics in the United States that they're sponging off of the US. You know, they could say that they're not just accepting aid, they're actually investing in technology that will help defend the United States itself in the future. So little hedging behaviors have emerged in terms of how the Israeli government manages its relationship with the United States. And that's just further evidence, again, that the relationship is not doing especially well at this point. We'll see how much further it goes. The status quo ante is always the safest bet in foreign policy. So it's entirely possible that if and when the Iran conflict resolves and the Strait of Hormuz opens, that we kind of go back to the status quo ante, where the Israelis are just kind of going apeshit in Gaza, but otherwise are in the process of normalizing relationships in the region. Probably a cap to how far they can go with normalization, but they have been making some progress in recent years. I'm sure Washington would be quite happy to go back to sleep. They don't like dealing with this. It's basically a no-win scenario for Washington. Very, very thorny issues in the Middle East that are hard for strategists to address in any kind of satisfactory way. So the sooner it all ends, the better, as far as Washington is concerned.
So a bit thorny and not at their best.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all the most exciting stuff I had. Some other random bizrata, but I don't know how interesting it is. How are we doing on time?
Been going for hour 20.
Hour 20. I don't think we had any questions. Oh, yeah. Did you see those maps I sent?
Oh, yeah. I'll show that after my match.
Gotcha. talk about the mass protests in India?
I don't think so. What happened there?
Let me find it here. So let's see, there was a chief justice, apparently, who made some who insulted some unemployed youth, basically saying that they were sponges, parasites, etc. And he was criticizing them because they disproportionately show up on protests. You know, there are frequent protests in India, and this guy was basically saying that they're just unemployed losers. So people didn't like that, and so that sparked, of course, even bigger protests. And the Chief Justice in question had to walk back the comments. He said he was referring just to those with fake degrees. Yeah, it did not convince anybody, as you can imagine.
Are there a lot of fake degrees that go out?
There's some, but yeah, it's not enough to power mass protests. Certainly not in South Asia. So eventually those protests actually morphed into a kind of movement, and they actually started making specific demands. They were especially interested in education reform and enforcing a very particular education minister to step down. The context there is that there was a scandal recently in India regarding national exams that had to be thrown out and redone because it was revealed that there had been some corruption involved. Basically, people were buying off officials so that they could get passing grades. I think it was something like they were paying people for the actual questions. I don't remember the details. But people were very upset about it. And so this movement is basically expressing the popular dissatisfaction with that scandal by demanding the guy who was responsible for the Department of Education during the scandal step down, resign. So those protests have been ongoing for a month or two now. They call themselves the Cockroach Janata Party.
Because they won't go away?
No, because they're the roaches. The government hates them, thinks they're vermin, and so they decided, okay, well, we'll be vermin.
We'll just own
That's
it.
fine. Yeah, just own it. Yeah, the education minister in question actually did end up resigning. So they actually did achieve one of their objectives. Not sure how they're doing on the rest. Whew. Excuse me. I think I did read there's some mass protests in Kashmir too. But this is Azad Kashmir. This is not the Kashmir that is part of India. This is the part of Kashmir that's part of Pakistan. They call it Azad Kashmir over there. Azad is, that means free. So basically free Kashmir. Yeah, the protests recently had to do with a bill that was passed, I think in Pakistan, that it reserves a certain number of seats in Azad Kashmir's parliament for refugees who came from India. And that upset people in Azad Kashmir, apparently. There's already a degree of tension because they see their territory as being dominated by the Pakistani government. To the point where they themselves do not actually have sufficient representation in their own government. And so the Pakistani government requiring seats to go to immigrants, well, not immigrant, refugees, that exacerbates that. They see that as a ploy by the Pakistani government to create seats that will be filled by people loyal to Islamabad.
Gotcha.
Basically, different refugees have refugee groups that represent them and then run politicians on their behalf. And those groups are funded in part by the Pakistani government. So the people of Azad Kashmir apparently would prefer to just have open elections. They don't want any seat reservations or any other chicanery. They want open elections, and they want them to be representative. They want them to be clean, not corrupt, and to be void of basically Islamabad's machinations. None of that is going to happen. They're going to be disappointed. But they have been hitting the streets recently vis-a-vis that particular bill. I thought it was interesting because I very rarely hear about protests in Azad Kashmir. The Pakistani military generally shuts that shit down. Mm-hmm. Not just the protests, but media coverage. So you don't really hear about it much.
Chad asks, how is Maduro doing?
It's still cooling his heels in jail, as far as I know. I haven't heard any updates on his trial. Yeah, I'm not paying attention to the trial. I don't think much is going to come out of that. I mean, best case scenario, he goes to jail for a while. But it would not surprise me in the least if he ended up getting like a pardon as part of some broader deal with Caracas or some such. I don't think that'll happen under the Trump administration, mind you, but presumably we will at some point live in a United States that is not governed by Donald Trump, I assume. And when that day comes, there may be some big changes in foreign policy.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
I have the maps. They look like they're small pixel, but you can still get the idea. This one has Austria, Hungary, Romania, Poland, Slovak Republic, Germany. There's purple, red, green, and bright yellow in the middle, or orange.
Yeah, so the purple was annexed by Germany, the orange annexed by Hungary, and then Poland got the green. You can see a little smidgen of green territory there across the Czechoslovak border, right in the middle. That's the bit that Poland took.
How come they took a small amount and the others took a large amount?
Well, that small amount was the specific disputed territory that they had been fighting over for like 20 years. That was the only bit that Poland was interested in. There had been a substantive ethnic Polish presence in those territories, hence Warsaw's interest. It was basically the same. Go ahead.
Warsaw is just a really cool sounding city, and that's all I had there.
Oh, no, yeah, no problem. I concur completely. I was very sad to find that's actually the totally incorrect pronunciation. It is actually pronounced Warsaw.
Does it mean a saw that's used for war, though?
That would be really cool if it were.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not.
Damn. Next time. Huh. And this was when again? When did this occur?
1938.
Gotcha.
Yeah, basically the territories that the Hungarians took were populated with a significant ethnic Hungarian population. And in the Sudetenland, the territory that Germany took was similarly heavily populated with ethnic Germans. So that was nominally the impetus there for seizing the territories in question. Yeah, the Slovak Republic there and the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, those were both rump states that were created out of Czechoslovakia after these territorial concessions were made.
And a rump state is a country that is shaped like a butt?
I'm afraid not, but it were otherwise. International relations would be much sexier if it were.
What is a rump state?
A rump state is basically a country that is carved out of a previously existing country, and it is generally much smaller. So Czechoslovakia had been, as you can see, much larger. It then lost a significant amount of territory, and what was left was broken up into two separate states. So those two states are rump states.
Gotcha.
Just what was left after the carving.
brisket state. Okay, and you did have another.
That's basically just zoomed in to the territory that Poland took.
Mm-hmm.
It's more detailed, so you can see the tiny territories that they also took as a part of that push to get the territories in question.
This is the other one. Territories annexed by Poland from Czechoslovakia following Munich Agreement are blue. I see.
So the big blue one there is the one you saw on the other map, but the other ones you see there were too small.
Ah, right. So they did grab some other areas. Is it the same reason of there were Polish people there?
Yeah, pretty much. At least that's my understanding.
Cool. I did not know this, but that's a general theme in history. A lot of map lines change. Especially when there's a country that kind of misbehaves and overextends, then some people will chop up some of their territory. But yeah, there was a weird fascination. We talked about this last week. A fascination with countries having their own type of people in it. So like the Greeks and the Turks yeeting whatever was not native. So a lot of the countries, when you visit them now, it seems like, wow, it's just all Turkish people or it's a bunch of Greek people. But historically, there are times when things are more diverse rather than less. Chad asks, would Hungary post-World War I be a rump state?
That's tricky. Because Hungary didn't really have a state before World War I ended. They were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But they also kind of did, because technically Hungary was an independent, well, not independent. Technically, Hungary was an autonomous kingdom within the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So, kind of. If you look at the Hungarian kingdom before World War I, then it had a lot more territory. So in the sense that they lost a bunch and that a new Hungarian state was carved out of that territory, yes, you could say that Hungary post-World War I was a rump state. But in so much as the Kingdom of Hungary was just one constituent part of the larger Austrian Empire, you could say that it was already kind of an arbitrary entity anyway. In that case, maybe not so much a rump state. Depends on perspective, basically. I'm sure Hungarian nationalists would argue that yes, it was definitely a rump state. They had a large, powerful kingdom, and then they were wronged. They were fucked out of their rightful land by Allied duplicity, Neuro.
Ah, I see.
And in a just world, they would have their territories back.
What was their peak domain?
Let me see if I can find you a map. But it extended well into what is now Romania, into what's called Transylvania. And they had bits and pieces of pretty much every country around them. Oops. 1914, not 41.
I love the vampire folklore of Transylvania. It's awesome.
Here, let's try this. Now, where are you? Neuro. Is that going to show up? Yeah, so the green in that map is Hungary. And everything you see there is Austria-Hungary, but the green specifically was the Kingdom of Hungary. And let me see if I can find an overlaid map. Oh, that's perfect. Right there. This one. So that second map shows you what had been Hungary's borders and then borders today. So you can see how much they lost and how much they want back. And what an impossible dream getting any of it back is going to be. Mm-hmm. There's no way they're getting all of that back.
I think the thing that nationalists don't realize is a lot of these historical time periods involved a lot of neglect of the lower classes. So if you take this territory and you want to have an upright civilization, you have to administrate those areas too, which is work. And who is it? Paul Rand, the Republican congressman. He famously said, "It's a lot harder to be an administering party than to be an opposition party." After he had to administer after being an opposition candidate, because they were kind of roasting him about the healthcare stuff they were trying to push through that just kept failing. And they're like, "Why aren't you producing results?" And he was like, "Guys, it's hard." Which, agree with him or not about his policies, he was right about that. Government is pretty hard. Making sure all the stuff goes to its proper place and you get enough consensus that you can pass stuff is hard.
Yeah.
And then now, as we've learned with Russia invading Ukraine, taking territory is also very hard, even if you have the larger conventional army. I found it interesting that Bitter Sugar was saying that drone warfare was so instrumental for their defense to last as long as it has.
Yeah.
And I think this is probably the first major conflict where it's a primary driving force, because maybe the U.S. has used some drones in some Middle East stuff, but not at this scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the first, basically, industrial drone war in history. And they've been around for a while, but yeah, the scale is off the charts for this one. But it's probably going to become the new norm. It's too cost-efficient a form of warfare to not be adopted more broadly. And you have seen other countries and even some non-state actors start using them in the way that the Ukrainians do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, part of the reason for the bereavement of Hungarian nationalists is that the territories they lost were populated by ethnic Hungarians. They were not always a majority, but they were there. And part of the reason they were shorn of those territories as part of the peace agreements that ended World War I was partly because they wanted self-determination for ethnic minorities, but there was also a sense that they kind of wanted to punish Hungary a little bit. Since they were, a loser in the war, there was a sense they needed to reward their allies and whatnot. So the Hungarian nationalists argue that that punitive motivation was the main one, and that this was unjust. Highly debatable, and given how the interwars went, things probably would not have turned out all that different, even if they'd kept all the territory. Everybody and their mother was going to war with each other in the interwar years over ethnic claims to territory. So they may well have just ended up in a conflict where they lost it all.
It's crazy they got the moms involved too.
Sorry, what?
It's cool they got the moms involved too. You said everyone and their mother was doing a ethnic war.
Oh. Sorry.
That's okay.
Sometimes it just comes out. I don't always think about it.
It's okay. Just riff in here. I make mom jokes all the time. I had some pretty good ones earlier. It's one of the things that it's almost like having your own agent within your own mind that has a job. And anytime they think that they can respond to that job, they want to try. So you face a situation like someone says a sentence. There's basically an agent in my mind that checks, is this a your mom joke? And it tries it. And sometimes it is. So I just kind of mouth off with that. And normally I'm really nice to people, but yeah, sometimes the mom jokes, it's too easy of a layup to miss it. I was wondering randomly about Myanmar. Have things settled down or stabilized there at all, or is it kind of same as you last told us?
I haven't heard any updates in weeks. Last I checked, the rebels were losing, or at least losing some territory. The military junta that governs Myanmar benefited from the shift in policy in Beijing. The Chinese had been kind of staying out of it, but late last year, I think it was, they shifted gears and decided to start openly backing the junta. Yeah, they would prefer that states on their border not be failed states that are mired in civil war.
Mm-hmm.
That creates a lot of negative externalities for them in the border region. So they've been trying to invest in the junta, give them some more resources, money, weapons, etc. The Russians have been doing the same on a smaller scale. So that's given the junta a boost, and they've been using it to take back some of the territory they had lost previously when the rebels had all of the moment. When the rebels had all of the momentum. But yeah, other than that, I haven't heard anything. It's been a quiet front in the news. Other events in other regions of the world have been kind of crowding them out, you could say.
Hmm. Seems like it's still a relatively major issue, though, compared to a lot of stuff that gets covered.
Well, consider with the Iran conflict, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz has economic impacts that go well beyond the region.
Yeah.
That creates difficulty for the whole global economy. So everybody's affected. Everybody has an interest in that conflict's resolution. You cannot say the same about the civil war in Burma.
That's true.
Yeah, the war has been going on for what, like almost. Wait, when did it start? It was 2020, right? I'm blanking out all of a sudden. 2021. Okay, so 5 years now, half a decade. So it's been going on for half a decade, and the impact on the global economy has been pretty much zilch.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not even really that noticeable unless you live in the region itself. And even for those who live in the region, the effects have not been all that disruptive. Maybe refugees coming across the border into India or Thailand. It's been a little easier for scammers to do shit in Burma on account of the civil war, so there's been some action on that count. But beyond that, yeah, like not that big an impact overall. So it's easy to ignore, especially if you don't live in Southeast Asia. Yeah, some conflicts just get forgotten. They're just not important enough, so they don't get attention. Sudan's civil war is very much in that category.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody really seems to give a shit about them.
I randomly had a Dota teammate who was raging at their team and accusing them of being from a certain country, and it just seemed so random to me. I had to ask them about it. They were upset with how someone was playing, and they accused them of being Somali, and I was like, Somali? That's kind of specific. Why that? And just them being racist, I guess, but it seemed kind of random to me because most people don't talk about Somalia. It's one of those less talked about countries.
Yeah, that is kind of a far right talking point in the US, because there is a significant Somali population in Minnesota, I believe.
Uh-huh.
And there's been a lot of attention in far right media on alleged scams that are supposedly perpetrated in Minnesota, taking advantage of, what was it? It was social spending of some kind. I think it was like daycares. Is that what it was?
Uh-huh.
I want to say
the
that
Somali
there was
daycare thing?
Huh. What was it?
The Somali daycare thing?
Yeah. That was a talking point for a while. But that kind of just dovetailed with pre-existing prejudice against Somali migrants.
I see.
Yeah, so the American right has been fixating on the Somali migrant community in particular. And I think excuse me, there's this Democrat group called the Squad. It's a group of progressive Democrat House reps, I think. And one of them is Somali, or of Somali descent anyway. I think it's Ilhan Omar. You probably heard of him.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, so they like to harp on. I think Trump was ragging on her just recently, actually. There's a persistent rumor that she's having sex with her brother.
Okay.
Yeah, so that just kind of crops up every now and again when the far right wants to shit on her. And so Trump took the opportunity recently to insinuate that's what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's never short of cheap talk.
Yeah, kind of a lowbrow way to attack someone, but whatever works.
Yeah, it's the internet. It's pretty much what I expect at this point. But yeah, that's my best guess as to why Somalis in particular were brought up there.
My first thought was, did your family get held up by pirates or something? Like, what happened? Yeah, mentioning that South African immigrants thing, it can seem really random if you're not like sipping the same Kool-Aid as them. For someone who's a hater of any demographic, you don't really know why until you ask them. But a lot of times it ends up being the same thing with selling drugs to the kids. That's a standard go-to.
Maybe they're just Ethiopian. There is kind of a rivalry between Ethiopia and Somalia.
They neighboring countries?
Yep, big time.
How far back does their rivalry go?
Interesting. At least to independence. I think Somalia gained independence in the 1960s, and there was immediately a dispute over territory controlled by Ethiopia that was mostly populated by ethnic Somalis. I think the province was called Ogaden. It actually represents a big chunk of Ethiopia's territory in its east. It's mostly desert, though. It's not especially valuable, but since it had ethnic Somalis, the Somali government was of the mind that it should be part of Somalia. The Ethiopian government politely disagreed until the war, anyway, and then it was very impolite. Yeah, I think that was the Ogaden War in 1977, thereabouts. They fought over it. Didn't go well for Somalia, so no territory changed hands. Sound familiar?
Nope.
Countries fighting over territory populated by
Oh,
the
that
same
yes.
ethnic group.
Yeah.
It's the same all over. Europe's not distinct in that.
I saw that Thailand has mandatory military conscription. There was a video of people getting, I guess there's a test thing that tells them whether or not they're going to get drafted. Like they're either really happy or really sad or something. But what are the other countries in the world, do you know, if have mandatory military conscription?
A lot of them. Most of them. I think we've talked about this before, and I sent you a graphic at one point. Let me see if I can find that. Somalia. It might have been a while ago. Did you get a chance to look at that YouTube channel I recommended?
Not yet. I have the
Here it is.
maps. Germany is considering mandatory conscription. I think I remember that being mentioned.
Yeah, there's some drama about it. The government had this whole scheme where they were going to send out a survey,
Mm-hmm.
and you could basically signal your interest in serving in the military. And so, based on the results of the survey, they would rank people according to who would be the most interested in serving. And the idea was that if they did do conscription again, that the people who expressed the most interest would be the first to be conscripted, and they would only do the other people if the need arose, if they could not get enough people who had expressed interest.
I see.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the state of that plan is. I remember there was a lot of arguing about it. Lots of people are viscerally opposed to conscription being reinstated. They don't like the idea of having to fight and some conflict with Russia or in Ukraine or something.
Mm-hmm.
They really don't trust the government on that.
Yeah, I could see that. Especially given historical trends.
Yeah.
I have the map here that has Hungary in the center and a bunch of different color greens and yellows around it.
Yeah, so you see that thick red line? That was the border of Hungary when it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
I see. Austro-Hungarian, so they had joint leadership, or how did that work?
Well, for a long time, it was just the Austrian Empire, but in the 19th century, the educated ethnic Hungarians in the empire started to gain basically a national consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted more control over their territory. They wanted education in Hungarian, et cetera, et cetera. So the Austrian government decided to deal with that by taking the Kingdom of Hungary and giving it a kind of co-equal status within the empire with Austria proper. So it went from being just Austria to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. That was basically a way of appeasing the Hungarian nationalists.
Hmm. I see. But Hungarian is a different language, correct?
Oh, yeah, very much so. It's like some different branch of the Indo-European tree entirely. Has more in common with like Uralic languages, way,
Mm-hmm.
way to the east.
Hmm. Maybe kind of similar to Finnish then?
Yeah, I think it's similar, more similar to that. Certainly more so than with German.
So the Hungarian nationalists now would like to have all the stuff outlined in red?
Yep,
I see.
ideally. So a good chunk of Western Romania, most of Croatia, most of Slovakia. Yeah, all of that is Hungary proper in the minds of nationalists.
And they voted out
Problem
Orban, right?
They
Recently?
did. So this is probably not a. Not, it was never really a part of their foreign policy. They only ever talked about it for show, basically,
Mm-hmm.
to appease voters. But now, especially, it's not going to be foreign policy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nationalists actually started wearing this shirt where they had the original shape of the Kingdom of Hungary on it. So basically, the red outline you see was on the shirt.
Huh.
That was their way of subtly expressing their desire to regain the lost territory.
Subtly, not so subtly.
Yeah, Viktor Orban was seen wearing that on several occasions.
Oh, yeah. Reminiscing of the glory days. Back when we had more area on the map. Someone in chat doesn't like Hungary? Why is that? What's wrong with them? And then we have the other map here. This one. Austro-Hungarian Empire 1914. Austria is kind of light brown, dark brown.
It's
And
green.
I thought Hungary is green.
Yeah, specifically Hungary.
Mm.
Light brown is Austria, dark brown is the Czech territories. And then the other light brown to the northeast is Galicia, which was basically the Ukrainian territories that the Austro-Hungarian Empire controlled.
That looks like it has Poland. Krakow is in Poland, right?
It is now.
Oh. Was that some of the stuff in the highlighted area you showed us on the other map?
No, no. Galicia and the Polish territories you're talking about, that's now mostly part of Ukraine, modern Ukraine. Krakow, obviously, part of modern Poland.
Mm-hmm. Our chatterbug
Okay.
lives between Cluj-Napoca and Sibiu. Is that in Hungary? Looking at the map. Oh yeah, I see Sibiu. Okay, where's the other one? Cluj-Napoca. Well, I see Sibiu, so that's close to Romania and Serbia. Cluj-Napoca is eastern Transylvania. Aha. Oh my goodness, there was a funny kind of joke slash twist of fate in there's this online influencer guy. His name is escaping me. He's an asshole, so it doesn't really matter that much, I guess. But he's being brought to trial, I think, in Romania, or maybe he got extradited to the UK. But he's got human trafficking charges for what he was doing in Romania. So they were joking that the Brits are oftentimes mad about like the Romani migrants or whatever, but now this is people in Romania trying to get a Brit out. But he's a very bad man, so he needs to get some justice, I suppose.
Yeah, I think I'm familiar with the case you're talking about.
Oh yeah, it's Andrew Tate. That's his name.
Yeah. That is the asshole in question.
Yep. And he's in the very, very bad man category. Not even just like bad man.
Well, I did find that map of countries with conscription. It was in our
Nice.
DMs since I resent it basically, so it's loading.
Okay. Takes a little bit.
There we go.
Oh yeah, you showed this to me. I remember this now. Yeah, as soon as I see the colors on it and the areas. I do love me some maps, I'll say. That's one of my favorite things to look at. Good visual tool. Okay, this is the state of military conscription around the world. Gray is no armed forces or no information. Yellow is limited conscription. Blue is no enforced, and red is conscription. So off the rip, we see Cuba has conscription. What's this country in the upper left of South America?
Colombia?
Colombia. So this is Colombia, this is Venezuela, I guess. Okay. Why does Colombia have mandatory military conscription?
They fought God, I guess it was like a 70-year civil war, starting in the 1950s and then running until fairly recently when there was the nominal peace agreement signed between the government and FARC. So the conflict kind of waxed and waned over that time. It was more intense in some periods than others. I think especially it kind of de-escalated after the Cold War ended. But it was never entirely peaceful either. And so Colombia's military is more than a little bit engorged on account of it.
What were the factions fighting over?
At first, it was basically just class warfare. You know, the working class trying to mobilize. It's not as simple as that. You know, really, it had to do with pre-existing political tension going back to the early 20th century. You know, there was a lot of tension between reformists, leftists, some communists, and then the conservative elite, conservative middle class, etc. And then there's the rural-urban divide. It kind of goes on like that. But the gist of it, basically, is that Colombian politics was racked with hyper-partisanship in the 1940s and 50s. And that spilled out into violence, and that created not inconsiderable interest in revolution. And so some of the more militant actors involved went out into the jungle and formed FARC and started trying to overthrow the government.
Damn.
Given that there are big swaths of Colombia that are sparsely populated, it was not hard. It was not hard for them to find safe spaces, basically, to organize and set up headquarters and whatnot. And like I said, they fought for a very long time, all through the Cold War and then for a couple decades after.
Damn. This country in the southern part of the African continent, I believe, is Angola?
Yeah, big oil producer.
Mm-hmm. They have mandatory conscription. Why?
It's probably a legacy of the Civil War. It only ended in 2000, 2001, something like that. Ended in 2002, yeah.
And what were they fighting about?
Well, in the 60s, they were fighting against the Portuguese. They beat the Portuguese in 75, and immediately the different factions that had been fighting the Portuguese turned on each other. One of them was sympathetic to the Soviet Union and wanted to create a socialist society. The other one was nominally anti-communist, but was more just a personality cult led by this one dude. And because he was anti-communist, or pretended to be, he was backed by the United States and the West. I think there were some other factions, but they were much smaller. Those were the two main ones. So basically, they became a proxy conflict in the broader Cold War.
Yeah, that I was going to mention Vietnam because it kind of sounds like that. More clearly delineated people pushing for either a communist style or a capitalist style. But I guess it's described as socialist.
I don't know that they were ever explicitly communist, but if they weren't, they were communist in everything but name. Like, you can see it on their flag.
Mm-hmm.
Am I thinking of the right one? Oh, you know what? I might be wrong. Let's see. Nope, yeah. You can look up Angola's flag and see for yourself.
I see.
Yeah, I think Mozambique's flag is even less subtle.
Is there a little tiny red territory above Angola? Is that a different country or is that a part of Angola? Maybe just an article.
It is part of Angola.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's their little enclave there. It's on the other side of the Congo River.
See, is this Eritrea here? Or is this Djibouti?
Which one?
Near the Horn of Africa, a bit north of the Horn.
Oh, yeah, you were right. That's Eritrea.
I see. Chat's saying that Eritrea has a very bad conscription law that's bad enough to justify asylum.
Yeah, it's like 20 years forced service.
What?
Yeah.
What the heck?
You are basically a state slave when you're a conscript in Eritrea. They kind of use them for anything and everything.
Huh.
Yeah, they try to justify it in terms of the conflict. Well, the tension with Ethiopia. Eritrea had been part of Ethiopia and then broke away in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And they did fight a war over that. And because Ethiopia is so much bigger, the Eritrean government maintains a relatively large standing army to deter any potential Ethiopian aggression. The war has effectively been over for decades now, so that's probably bullshit. It's almost certainly mostly because the Eritrean government just likes exerting that degree of control over its people. It's an excuse to keep them in line and also to make some money off of slaves. A very popular activity throughout human history.
And what's the country south and west of Eritrea that's red?
That's South Sudan.
Ah. And they're still fighting.
Not really. Their fighting is kind of on again, off again. They did have a civil war after independence, but I think it ended a few years ago. I think conscription is more an issue of fear about potential Sudanese aggression. They had been part of Sudan, broke away. They had fought a long war against Sudan, off again, on again, intermittently for
Mm-hmm.
several decades before that. So there was probably some sense that they needed to maintain a relatively large army to deter any potential attempt by Sudan to reconquer South Sudan. That's a guess on my part, by the way. I don't know exactly why they have conscription.
Mm.
But generally, countries that have conscription have it for specific national security reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And in South Sudan's case, the only real national security consideration would be Sudan.
So they have good relations with their other neighbors?
Yeah, they're actually a part of, fuck, what was it called? There's actually an attempt to build a supranational institution in East Africa that's going to be kind of an East African European Union. They already have their own parliament. They've already got some laws. It's a work in progress. There's more progress in some years than others, but in general, it's probably the most further along of Africa's various attempts at creating regional blocks like this.
Mm-hmm.
And the last I checked, I believe South Sudan was a member of that group. Let me look that up. I was about to say it was called Igbo, but I'm pretty sure that's an ethnicity in Nigeria.
Yeah, one of the things that it can be a little lost when you're looking at world maps like this is if you're looking at a 2D map, there's going to be some distortion due to the Mercator projection. And Africa, relative to like the countries that are closer to the poles, it's very large. It takes a lot of space. So just kind of getting a sense of how large the countries are and how difficult it is to link the countries to each other in the way that like the EU has rail from country to country. So it's pretty easy to transit around Europe, but Europe is, geographically speaking, a lot smaller than Africa is. Same thing with Brazil. I think Brazil is another one of those countries that's deceptively large because it's close to the equator and it's big, looking at a 2D map.
Huh. I guess it's just the East African community.
I see.
Guess I have the name entirely wrong in my head.
Chat says that ancient East Slavic kingdoms had conscription of 25 years, and it was considered a lifetime deal. Veterans were entitled to a free drink at any tavern, and they would point to the side of their throat where a veteran tattoo was. So now touching the side of your throat is commonly recognized as a gesture for drinking alcohol.
Really?
Cool. Didn't know that.
Huh.
25 years
That's
is
really-
a long time.
Yeah, I could see why they'd want to give them free drinks.
Yeah. So they don't get too pissed of being forced into labor for their lives.
Yeah. I imagine they had problems with desertion.
Mm-hmm.
Would have been a lot harder to police that back in the day.
We also know about Finland. Winter War kind of goes without saying. Switzerland is red. Huh. I'm going to ask Eche Fatum about that because I don't know if he had to do any military stuff or if there's certain
I think
careers.
it's pretty basic there. I think they just do like 6 months or so of basic training, and then they're pretty much out.
I see.
Yes, you're not like serving for a year or two like you would in South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
It's more just making sure they have the basic skills necessary to fight if they need to.
Mm-hmm. There's a country right next to Switzerland to the east that's red.
Austria.
Austria also does. Interesting. Why?
I always forget about Austria. I'm not sure why they have it. I would defer to Chad on that one.
Huh.
Austria has been officially neutral since World War II, so I don't know what they're preparing for. Maybe they're just like Austria and want to be maybe they're just like Switzerland and want to be as self-sufficient as possible. That's just a guess.
And then Greece and Turkey
Oh yeah,
both do.
yeah. Got to have large standing armies in case they have to go to war with each other.
Yeah. Old tensions run deep, I guess.
They do.
The Middle East has a lot of red countries.
Unsurprisingly.
Yeah. That one I think I know more of why.
Yeah. Lots of bloodletting in the region. Takes warm bodies.
We are fighting and we have been fighting. Well, cool. So most countries don't have it. Definitely a rarity. Cuba does. Interesting.
I wonder what national security imperative would justify that.
Ah, yeah. Do the math yourselves.
That's a tough one. Just being an island nation off the coast of the most powerful nation in the history of the human race.
Yep, no
How do you
pressure.
plan for that?
No pressure. Yeah, I don't know what you would do because you have a much smaller landmass, and your capacity to defend yourself is pretty limited by air. And they're, I think, relatively, I would guess, far behind in tech, but far ahead in experience. Because if they've been doing Cold War shit and being self-sufficient for a long time, the dudes that they have are pretty skilled. I remember the Cuban bodyguards were mentioned in the Maduro thing. When he got kidnapped, he had some Cuban bodyguards, which we speculated that there's a possibility they were paid off or something, but it's just interesting that they're professional military people for hire that are doing gigs in other countries.
Yeah. Yeah, Cuba doesn't have a lot to export other than its human capital. So, be it doctors or mercenaries, they do what they can.
Yeah. Kind of reminiscent of North Korea sending some people to Ukraine.
Kind of similar, yeah. Just trying to make money, basically. Excuse me. Yeah, we'll see what happens to Cuba after the whole Iran thing dies down. Because I doubt that Washington is done with it. Trump has sent too many signals that he's interested in doing something.
Yeah, they probably won't let him fuck about until the Iran stuff settles down.
We'll see. We'll have something new to complain about in 2027, I've no doubt.
The fussing around in Iran has a lot bigger economic ramifications now that you're kind of making the comparison between Myanmar and Iran. Is even though the Myanmar thing is more about the fate of the country and it matters for them, it's not creating a global impact that affects people's like gas prices and stuff. So there's a lot more buzz about Iran, even though they have their legit issue over there.
Yeah, Cuba doesn't have the advantage of having a strategic choke point that they can choke off. They don't have that leverage. And they're going to have a really hard time supplying their military in the event of a conflict because they're completely surrounded by water, right? It's an island. So Iran can get supplies through the Caspian Sea, which is more or less beyond the American military's reach. I could probably try, but there are severe limitations there. So that's always going to be a relatively safe route for them. And Burma, of course, has land border with China, so the junta can get supplies through there. But Cuba, they don't have any of that. Like the U.S. Navy is going to blockade them completely in the event of a conflict, and so they're only going to have what they have on the island at the start of the conflict, and that's about it.
Who are their main allies, if they have any?
They really don't, though.
Oh.
They have friendly relations with Russia, China, etc., but none of them have any real security commitments with them. I'm sure China would sell them drones and drone parts if they could, but with a blockade in place, they're not going to be able to get anything there. So the Cuban military is not going to be able to do the kind of drone warfare that the Ukrainians are doing, for example, or even the Iranians. They will have to use older tools. Yeah, the organization of the Communist Party on the island will definitely be an advantage for them. However, it's going to be offset by corruption. I don't doubt that there will be people whose loyalties are less than solid.
Or up for purchase.
Yeah. So they could take advantage of that. It's not as though the party is especially legitimate in the eyes of much of the public there. So in the event of a conflict, they're really going to have to lean heavily on the foreign invader angle. However badly the party has done in governing Cuba, nobody really wants their country to be invaded and occupied by a foreign power.
Yeah.
Especially with one that has as poor relations with the victim as Cuba and the United States have. Lots of bad blood there, basically. So it's entirely possible that the Cuban government could get away with mobilizing the public in defense of the country. It would probably be harder than in Venezuela. The Venezuelan government was especially delegitimized. They really ran the country into the ground. But it was also still technically a democracy, even if it was a severely flawed, illiberal one. So there had still been some room for civil society. The Cuban government has not really allowed for that. There's way, way less civil society in Cuba than even in Venezuela at its worst. So there's not nearly as much to work with there if you're an outside power looking to mobilize people against the government. I'm hoping Washington doesn't do something stupid in Cuba, but hoping the Trump administration doesn't do something stupid is a losing bet if ever there was one. So I'm pretty pessimistic at this point.
Is there anything that he would want? Like, is there resource to be gained or something?
There's really not. It's just raw ego. It's been a running problem for American foreign policy for decades, just having a nominally hostile island nation just off our coast. And Trump thinks he's the guy that's going to solve it. That's pretty much it. The only real policy significance, the only real policy issue that Cuba represents at this point is immigration, since a good chunk of the island's population is actually left at this point, and not a few of them have ended up in the U.S. So in so much as illegal immigration is a core national security issue, which it really should not be, but in so much as it is, Cuba could be considered relevant to that. But beyond that, Cuba poses no real national security threat to the United States. Like, it's not going to invade the United States. It's already been deterred from hosting foreign military bases. There's no real threat there that needs to be addressed. Like, everything the United States really wants out of Cuba, it already has, at least in terms of American security. I've seen Trump make some noise about wanting American investment in Cuba, but I haven't seen any rationale as to why that's important. Maybe just building up American influence so we have more leverage to further deter them from doing things that are already not doing. I guess that could be considered a strategy, but I haven't really seen them articulated in those terms. So anybody's guess with the Trump administration. They kind of just do their own thing and then try to rationalize it after the fact. I'm sure they'll have plenty of excuses once they do whatever it is they're planning in Cuba.
I think you were mentioning that Cuba, kind of like Iran, was one of those Cold War bad guys that I guess there's just kind of the carryover sentiment of they were in opposition when they were growing up. So any of the old people in power now kind of see that as I don't know, an old enemy or old rival, but I don't really know what current threat Cuba poses to us, if any.
They're not going to do anything. They can't afford to do anything. They can't even afford to keep the lights on at this point. All of their problems with electricity have gotten worse in the past couple of years, compounded by the de facto American blockade. So it's not a threat. Like, what can they conceivably do at this point? I guess you could say there's an interest in human rights in Cuba. We want them to treat their people better, but it would be weird of Washington to do that, given its relations with other countries that also don't give a shit about human rights. I would be genuinely shocked if the Trump administration had altruistic reasons for intervening in Cuba. That would probably be the single most shocking thing he could do in foreign policy.
Well, he'll take credit if something appears altruistic for sure, but yeah, I don't think that would be a intrinsic motivation of his to just help him out, to be a nice guy.
Oh yeah, what about this? I'm looking at the East African community again.
What are the countries in it?
Let's see. Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, South Sudan, Somalia, apparently, and DR Congo. You know what? I think I do remember. It was IGAD. There it is. Intergovernmental Authority on Development. That's what I was thinking of. But that's a trade bloc, apparently. So the parliament and supranational institutions are East African Community. And then the trade bloc is Intergovernmental Authority on Development. Okay. Huh. Good to know. Yeah, of all the regions in Africa, East Africa has its shit together the most. So big projects like that have made more progress than equivalent projects elsewhere. There is technically a South African development community, I think, but virtually nothing has happened with it in decades. And I think there's another one in like Equatorial Africa, but that hasn't even made it past the planning stage. They've been planning for like 60 years now. Nothing happens. Oh yeah, what was the West African one? ECOWAS.
That one's
The economic community of West African states. That's another one that's made a lot of progress, but they've experienced significant setbacks recently, and there's a number of member states that withdrew after military coups overthrew their governments. That was like the drama in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, etc. And they lost a good number of their members as a result.
How's Nigeria been doing? Because they're, I think, the biggest economy in Africa, right?
South Africa would be the biggest economy, but Nigeria has the largest population.
Ah, I see.
Let me fact check that. I guess that works. Yep, South Africa, largest GDP.
Got it.
Egypt is second, Nigeria is third.
Ooh.
They're doing okay. I haven't heard any drama recently anyway. I think the last thing in my notes was couple of opposition party leaders banding together to form a new group. But who knows if that'll actually go anywhere. Don't think I've heard any Nigerian news since. Nothing's coming to mind anyway. Well, I guess there was the US government bombing them over Christmas, but I'm pretty sure that was mostly just symbolic.
Symbolic bombing.
That's what it was. They had been alleging that there was a genocide of Christians in Nigeria. And they demanded that the Nigerian government allow them to do something about it. We talked about it at the time. It was stupid because the Nigerian government had already been cooperating with the US military for years trying to deal with jihadis. But that wasn't entertaining enough for Washington, so the Trump administration made up a story about a genocide and then performatively bombed Nigeria over Christmas, presumably to appease Christian voters in the United States that genuinely believe bullshit about genocides in Nigeria. Yeah, American theatrics reaching lofty new heights in the 2020s.
Yep. We have a lot in common with Idiocracy in terms of playing wrong notes loud.
Unfortunately so.
Yep. Bravado seems to go a long way. That's something that I guess a lot of world leaders, they try to lead with temperance and grace. And other leaders try to lead with kind of bombast and bravado, where you're making big moves, you're talking a big game, and you're doing flashy stuff. Not necessarily long-term big impact stuff, but flashy stuff.
Yeah, we're very much in a new age of the strong man, so there are quite a few figures like that, unfortunately. C'est la vie. We'll see what comes after. I'm sure the next era will be upon us sooner or later. Hopefully, it's less dumb.
Are we saying there are no white people or Christians murdered in Nigeria? No, that wasn't our claim. The clarification was the bombing was a little bit performative because the Nigerian government is also trying to deal with the like radical groups that are doing this, where it sounded like it was a systematic Nigerian problem where they were perpetrating it, but it seems like they're trying to cooperate and deal with it too, because it hurts them as well. Like if you've got Nigerians who are Christians and they are being killed, that is also a Nigerian problem, not just a Christians around the world problem.
Most of the people perpetrating the violence are not even jihadis, they're just bandits. There's been a breakdown in law and order in the northern part of Nigeria in recent years, really all across the Sahel. The whole region is dealing with the fallout from it. But in Nigeria's case, it overlaps with a jihadist insurgency, Boko Haram. Some of you may remember the name. But yeah, like you say, like the Nigerian government had already been receiving assistance from the US government to try to deal with it. There certainly has been violence, but it has not systematically targeted Christians. That's bullshit. Most of the victims have been Muslim, specifically because the violence is concentrated in the north of Nigeria, which is like 90% Muslim anyway.
Yeah, it looks based on the map like the northern part is mostly desertous.
Yeah, semi-arid Sahel region, very prototypical for the area. There have been Christians that have been targeted. It's not like it hasn't happened at all, but the scale is hardly sufficient to be classified as a genocide.
I guess that's one of the last frontiers of Christians and Muslims fighting is the African continent generally, not specifically this, but I think also India's had a mix, but it hasn't really involved violence specifically. Yeah, where else are Christians and Muslims fighting?
Let me think.
Because most places it's settled, I feel.
Indonesia.
That's
specifically
a very majorly Muslim country, right?
Yeah, like 90%, but then you get into the Eastern Islands and you'll find islands with like 50% Christian population.
Hmm.
So like Sulawesi is like 20-30% Christian, something like that.
Hmm.
West Timor is pretty heavily Christian. And then the Spice Islands and some of the other islands that are smaller, they're generally like split 50-50 between Christians and Muslims.
Hmm.
And there's a long history of religious violence in that particular part of Indonesia. They haven't been fighting as much recently. It's kind of died down pretty significantly in recent decades, but it still does flare up occasionally.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know too many Indonesians because of the relation with the United States. There are a lot of people who are Filipino in the U.S., so they have a pretty big cultural imprint here, whereas Indonesia less so. I did have one of our WoW guildies who unfortunately passed away pretty recently, but he was from Indonesia, and
Oh,
due to the exchange rate, he was able to make a decent bit of money by farming materials in World of Warcraft and then selling those for real money.
oh,
So that was something that he ended up getting banned for on his main account. But don't tell anybody this. We let him pilot his best friend's account when his best friend couldn't attend a raid, so he did get to play with us a little bit still.
nice.
But we didn't feel like judgmental toward him for doing that, because if you're in a developing country and U.S. currency is strong and you want to grind a video game for money, I don't fucking care. I'm not Blizzard. I'm not gonna yell at you for that. I could respect it. So, to me, it just seems like another kind of way to be a entrepreneur and hustle. If you're able to know the farming routes and stuff and make some money, why not? So, we didn't yell at him or anything. It's more like feeling bad for him.
All my condolences.
Yeah. But I think there's a similar type of hustle that a lot of Southeast Asian Dota players do, where they'll level accounts. And I've heard from some of my my openly toxic chatters that you can purchase Dota accounts of both a certain MMR level. So if you want to get a high rank account and feel fancy, you can do that. Or you can purchase a high behavior score account, because some people, they like flaming their team, they like flaming the enemies. If they play Dota, their behavior score goes down, but you could have a nice Southeast Asian grinder who can just play on an account and it looks like a nice account, so you can buy that. And because their money is not super strong there relative to USD, it ends up being a decent way to hustle and get some extra change. I don't know exactly how much they're selling these for, what their hourly rate would be, but if it's competitive, like, why not? This is all against the Steam and Dota terms of service, by the way, so none of this is a recommendation. It's just what we've heard happen.
Gotcha.
And chat saying that low-ranked accounts also sell for a lot. Why is that? People want to smurf on them? Because if you buy a low-rank account, you can stomp people, and I guess that's enjoyable.
I couldn't imagine buying an account. I don't see the appeal.
You're not that type of gamer.
I guess not.
Buying an account, you've got a couple reasons for it. You're a strong player wanting to bully newer players, or you're a naughty player wanting a clean account, or you're so far down the Dunning-Kruger rabbit hole that you think that you're good, and buying a higher rank account will save you time. And you're just
Wow.
that good already. There are people that are this deluded.
Incredible.
Yeah, actual strong players, though, are too competitive to play on a lower account because it would be too boring. There's not enough thrill. I think a big part of what I enjoy about StarCraft and what I enjoy about Dota is when you can outplay someone who's good. That's the best feeling. Outplaying someone who's bad, it doesn't feel that good. It's like a college football player would beat up a middle schooler. That's not impressive. You're in a different weight class. But Yeah. The rush of battle is when you're besting someone who you haven't bested before. I think that's the most exciting win.
Interesting. Markets and everything.
Yep. Didn't Elon buy an account? Yes, he was accused of getting boosted in Diablo. And I think that was just to save him time. But in the videos that people have seen, or that were posted of him playing Diablo, it looked like he had a completely tricked out character, but he looked like a noob. Yeah, Path of Exile 2. Apparently his play was hilarious. It wasn't Diablo, it was Path of Exile. Gotcha. His gear was outrageously good with skill that didn't match. Oh, he clicked skills? Oh my gosh. Oh no. You hear that, chat? If you're someone who uses your keyboard to activate your abilities, you're a stronger gamer than Elon Musk.
That's rough.
Yep.
But I guess he can afford it.
Yeah. I would assume he can soak that cost. Yeah, and then the account got banned too. That's funny.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Why did it get banned?
I don't know. I guess it looked too suspicious, like there was account sharing. Because in almost all of these games, account sharing is against the rules.
Huh.
No.
I mean, how do you stop it, though? Because it's email verification, right?
Yeah, I would argue, or I would suspect that most companies don't really want to stop it because that's generating more excitement and interaction with your product. It's kind of similar to how Twitch doesn't have a heavy hand with view botting because it benefits them. They're getting more, at least the optics, it looks like they're getting more viewers than they actually are. So when they're talking to advertiser A with a shit ton of money over here and they say we have this many concurrent viewers, the higher inflated viewbot number looks better for their negotiations than the actual number without the bots. So with this kind of situation, if you have more Dota accounts being made, more matches being played, they have more concurrent players because of this, or at least it looks like they do. That again gives them more chance for a sponsorship for their tournaments and so on. So I think it's plus money for them to allow some level of like account buying and selling and not to chase it too hard. Like maybe the people who develop the game, they feel bad about it, but I kind of doubt it.
Well, when I'm a billionaire, I'll be sure to buy some accounts then.
I think there are much more exciting things to buy. I would want a bunch of cool cars, for one. You've got to have some sweet properties, for sure. And if you're, like, fuck you money rich, people tend to have seasonal homes. So they'll have a place that's nice in the winter season and a place that's nice in the summer season, and you kind of bounce between them. I've met some of these people here in South Dakota. They're like the not real locals. So they're, to the grizzled locals here in South Dakota, they seem kind of like fair weather visitors where they're cool and they're nice and it's cool to have them around. But if you're not here for the winter, are you really suffering with us? You're going to California, Arizona in the winter. Are you really South Dakotan?
Actually, how is the weather right now?
It's hot. It's been
Still?
yeah, just above 90 most days. Yeah, not the most pleasant, but it's really nice at nighttime. So if you go out between 10 p.m. and the middle of the night, it's great. Very pleasant temperature, but it's hard to see where you're going because we have no infrastructure.
Oh, wow.
It's just the dark forest.
Yeah, you don't have like lampposts and stuff?
Nope. You can see with the stars, or if the moon is bright, you can see pretty well. But those are your only forms of lighting.
Damn.
The suburbs is kind of crazy because you have so many lights in such regular intervals that it's almost hard to find a really dark place.
Mm. Yeah, this is true. Very rare. There's a lot of ambient light out here.
But yeah, offer still stands if you want to Come see the frontier of America.
I probably need to. At the very least, it would give me an excuse to finally give you that mahjong set.
Yeah.
How long has it been? Would have been 2019. So, yeah, I've been sitting on that gift for 7 years now.
Wow. Hopefully it's matured nicely.
I'm aging it for you. There you go.
Yeah.
Yes, this is my legendary procrastination at work. 7 years.
Well, you don't travel a ton, so. And traveling is expensive, too. Can't blame you for that. Flight prices went up quite a bit. It feels like a boomer when you talk about, back in the day, there was no TSA and you could just walk on the plane and flights were cheap. But now, yeah, you have lots of different hoops to jump through and cost has gone up. So for a lot of trips, the flight is a really big chunk of it, especially if you're going to a country that has like relatively cheap prices for an American consumer. Say Japan, by each meal, it's relatively cheap, but it's far as fuck. So the flight is a huge chunk of your overall trip cost. I would like to go to Japan at some point. I want to go to Japan. I want to go to Scandinavia. I want to go to South America. Those are some regions I would like to go to. South Korea would be cool as well.
Don't think I know anybody there. Maybe China. I might be able to hook you up with a China contact. Actually, you know exactly who I'm talking about.
Yeah. Oh man, I'll give him credit. Chinese cooking, like authentic Chinese cooking, god damn, that is some very excellent stuff.
It is very good. And there's some very good places in Beijing they were nice enough to take me to. Scandinavia don't know much about as far as travel. I do know you're going to have to try some of the fish. They got some kind of canned fish they eat over there. It's supposed to be really nasty.
Really stinky or something, yeah.
Yeah, you need to try some of that.
Surströmming or something.
Neuro.
Yeah. People, they react to it like they're throwing up or something, but yeah, I don't know how bad it smells. Only the Swedes eat it. Why do they eat it if it's so nasty? I guess there are some other foods that are nasty to outsiders, like durian fruit is really stanky. But people still cook with it and stuff.
I guess if you go to South America, you could hang out with Dagneb.
Yeah. Go to Argentina.
Get some beef.
Glide hook is from Brazil.
Oh, nice.
That would be funny if I did like a Neuro Chatter world tour. Surf on people's couches in various countries. Visit TRJ&Z in Australia.
Nice.
Look up Filipino egg food. Is that the one with the, like, there's partial bird embryo in it?
Ugh.
I've seen that.
That might be a little too exotic even for me.
We have a current bit of chicken drama this week. We have, I think, like 15 or 16 chickens on the property. And chickens are brutal and savage and ruthless and completely unkind. So if there's ever a chicken who's kind of sickly or down on her luck, they will just harass them to no end and sometimes eat them alive. So we have a chicken who's a little bit down on their luck and getting picked on by the other chickens. So we let the oppressed chicken go to the garden, which is a larger enclosure that's still safe from predators and a separate space from the other chickens, but they can walk around and chill and stuff and not be harassed constantly. Because if the chickens are healthy, they're less likely to get picked on, but they don't really have the ethical orientation of if someone is hurt, you should help them. They say if someone is hurt, we should finish the job.
Yeah. Yeah, they're little raptors. They got that killer instinct in them.
Yep.
Yeah, we put up with their bullshit because they're so tasty. Nice cheap meat.
Yeah, I think they yield very high meat for their size. And they also have relatively lower environmental impact than cows. I don't know how much of a meme it is, but cows do produce a lot of methane. So
Yeah.
they're not the most efficient.
Yeah. Take up a lot more land, too. Takes a lot to graze a herd.
We're kind of debating which animals to get next for the property. Maybe 2 cows and a donkey. That's kind of the suggested plan. And they would be cows for just like companionship to have around for fun and for dairy. I don't think we would do like cows for meat. That seems hard. Like the people who do that, you have to either be very emotionally detached or just not interact with them very much. I feel like it would be too sad because it's like, yay, we have a cow. Let's meet the cow. And it's like, okay, we're going to kill you and eat you. It's nicer when you have the renewable resource relationship. Like the chickens, our chickens lay eggs for us. We don't kill them unless they're like about to die anyway or something. But the types of chickens that you use for eggs or for meat are completely different. The ones for meat have like huge ass legs and stuff, and they're just massive. The ones that we have, they lay different color eggs, so that's kind of cool. But they're pretty small, and if you did harvest one for meat, it's not very much. It's almost more trouble than it's worth.
I have a relative who used to milk cows on the regular when they were a kid, living on a farm. Used to squirt the cats with it.
The cats probably like it. Cats enjoy milk. If they're given
yeah, they did. They try to drink it.
Oh, wow.
Still a messy process, though.
Do you have a
You
cat?
have to do it every day. No, not anymore. Not for some years now, actually.
I feel like you
Cats
would be
are nice.
a good cat owner.
Yeah, I'm not really a good pet owner in general, but cats are nice because they mostly take care of themselves.
Yeah.
They kind of do their own thing. Very chill animals when they want to be.
Yeah. They have a decent bit of variation in personality. I remember back in the living with Kukio days, I had it as kind of my just personal set of beliefs that I hated cats because they were selfish. They didn't respect the dominance hierarchy like dogs do. And they have this like brain parasite that they can transmit if they're like a stray cat in the streets and stuff. And for those reasons, I really disliked them. And some of the cats that I met were really, I don't know if obstinate is the right word, but they were very needy and vocal, which is kind of annoying to me. But I realized that after meeting some different cats that not all cats are like that, and there are some cats that are really affectionate and they also give you space really well, and they don't really nag you too much. So my brother's cat is super, super chill. He's very kind of take care of himself, and he's also, I don't know, he just seems very easygoing. He doesn't really insist upon things unless it's an obvious need, like his food is gone or he has no water. But aside from that, he's not a very whiny animal. And he's even like pretty good at play. Like he'll wrestle and kind of play bad at you without getting into that legit hostile mode. Because some cats, it seems like they don't do wrestling. Like they take a play wrestle as an attack, and we are now in combat mode to the death, and they take it very seriously. But he's fine to kind of romp around and stuff, so he's a nice cat. I like cats better now.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you know how to handle them, they can be a lot of fun. If you don't know how to handle them, then you bleed.
Yeah. Yeah, every animal has its fuse, and this includes humans, where you have a certain meter of how much physical touch you would like. And when you go past that, you get annoyed. So you have to figure out for each unique person or animal or whatever, how much attention do they want? How much physical contact do they want? Because some people are all about it. Like there are some dogs that are a love sponge. Well, they'll basically take as much petting as you'll give them. And then others that are like, you shouldn't even touch them because they'll get snippy with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to learn the hard way not to pet the stomach.
Yeah.
They'll tease you. They'll get on their back and roll around and make it look like they want you to pet their stomach. And then when you do, then you bleed.
Yeah. Chat's joking that the brain parasite got me. It's made me favorable to cats. The natural adaptation of chickens to kill the weak was to prevent sickness in the flock. That would make sense. That's another one of those examples where nature invents something that is inherently brutal, but it serves a purpose. And it's something that we would never want to replicate. Like polar bears, for example, if they have a litter of bears or whatever, they give birth to some, the mother polar bear will often eat the youngest one just as a snack. This is considered very unethical in human societies. If you were to have multiple twins, to think of eating one of the children is atrocious and a great evil, but in nature, when calories are scarce, that's an option. And then another thing while we're on bears, a lot of times a male bear, if it sees a mother bear with cubs, it'll just try to eat one of the cubs. So a lot of times you'll have a mama bear fending off a male bear that's just trying to eat stuff. When similarly, human society, we would consider that to be extremely uncouth and evil to like try and eat someone's children. But nature is scary and brutal, so. How good is my internet? Thanks to Christy Gnome, I have fiber internet, so it's very fast. Very fast, very reliable. Thanks to Mrs. Fuckplane.
Thanks to Mrs. Fuckplane.
Mm-hmm. Who embezzled who knows how much money to put in the Cayman Islands from this deal. Rare.
Lots of jokes there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to. I'll restrain myself.
TRJ and Z's advice for people visiting Australia is to visit New Zealand instead. Why? Is it just the like scenery per mile is better there or something?
Actually, what about that? Do we have? I mean, they're both good tourist destinations. Let's see. Yeah, on Puerto Rico today. I'm looking at the flags.
Hmm.
I don't think I've seen Puerto Rico on here before. That seems new. Or have I just not noticed it before?
Don't know. I know one of my brother's best friends is Puerto Rican, but he's not in Puerto Rico. He's in the U.S.
Gotcha. Spain, Bulgaria, to Russia, to Australia. Oh, one Singapore. That's interesting. And the only time I hear about Singapore anymore is vis-a-vis trade policy.
What do we trade with them?
Well, more just the fallout from the trade conflicts that the Trump administration likes to wreak. Generally has an indirect impact on Singapore. Like tech companies and manufacturers will relocate there. The re-export trade is pretty prominent there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a lot of the disruptions in the region tend to disproportionately impact them.
I see.
But because that's what most of the news focuses on, I don't really hear as much about like the domestic politics there. So I really don't know what people there are talking about. What's new in Singapore?
Tell us, Chen.
Oh yeah, 3 Denmark.
The Danes are awake. Good morning.
Seems like an unusually high number.
Yeah, that would be a fun thing to figure out, is the like relative viewership from each country. So we have a pretty large percentage of Denmark watching the stream this evening. It's a relatively smaller country. What's the population of Denmark?
6 million?
Yep. So you're very close. 6.03 million, says AI.
Nice. Oh, one's Serbia. That's unusual. One France, one Chile, 2 Germany. Neat. Mostly the usual suspects.
Yeah, I like the variety in how people communicate with each other. I was just joking with one of my German chatters that the German way of communicating with people is very matter of fact. Compared to an American way of delivering stuff, we Americans have a little bit more of a performance of like happiness when you talk about something, or there's more of like a go get 'em oorah, you can do it energy, which has some like false positivity to it, you could say.
Yeah.
So we tend to cushion stuff that we say a little bit more than some cultures that are a little bit more dry and kind of deadpan with their delivery. So I try to always keep stuff in context when someone from a particular country is communicating with me. Sometimes their norms are a little bit different from ours. Sometimes people call Americans fake nice. But for our services sector, I think we have a little bit more of an incentive to put on a performance because we can get more money with a tip kind of culture.
Yeah. Yeah, we got people moving here from all over the world. Most of them don't speak English as their first language, so over the centuries we kind of evolved that norm to try to be friendly. Helps grease the wheels.
Seemed like most of the visitors for the World Cup liked America, so that's good. We didn't do too bad.
Well, I mean, given how much they paid for the tickets, I would hope so.
Yeah.
It's steep.
I was glad there was no, I guess, violent activity that happened with regards to it, because I know sometimes with big events, any terrorist who's looking to get some attention could hop on anything. Like they've hit marathons before where people are just going for a run. So I was a little bit worried about that when it was hosted in the U.S. because we have been more ambitious with our assholery around the world recently.
True. That's true.
There are
But
some
that's
reasons
always-
some people would dislike us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but that's not new. I mean, ever since 9/11, there's been a big focus on public security for big events. They've got them locked down pretty well by now. So you're right, there's always a chance, but they've done pretty well in securing big events. Yeah, generally they actually catch it in the planning stage. A lot of the security you see on the ground is more theater than anything.
Well, good on you, security people.
Yeah. Thank you for making me safe. Although I would appreciate if they stopped recording my browser history. I keep all of that shit. Big, giant databases.
If they want to look at my browser history, knock yourself out. I hope they're entertained. Yeah, it's kind of sad, I guess is the right word, just to see the erosion of privacy. Back in the 90s, if you had something, it was your item. You buy a game, and it was a physical item that you now own. Now stuff is in clouds, and people can peek at the clouds, and yeah, it's really easy to see all the movings that people are doing. You have to go through a lot of hoops to get different aspects of privacy for yourself. Because of my role as a live streamer on a daily basis, I kind of have the mental preparation and acceptance that anything I say or do can be recorded because my mic could be hot. I've made a few whoopsies earlier in my streaming career where the mic is hot or the raid to another channel didn't work all the way, so I was still broadcasting to the internet. Fortunately, I didn't get in trouble for any of those things, but anyone who streamed for long enough, there are going to be slip-ups that happen in some form or fashion. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where I don't expect privacy for myself. I hope for it for other people, but yeah, stuff is not really ironclad and airtight, so whatever.
Well, we lament it. Maybe we can mitigate it. But yeah, it does seem kind of inevitable at this point.
Yep. Well, here's to hoping we get some lucky breaks in the future. I'm excited for our ability to generate more resources for ourselves so we can work on the fun problem of how to entertain ourselves, because I think us gamers have a good leg up in fulfillment and purpose, even if we don't need to work as much of the week as we have in the past. We can still build glorious empires in virtual spaces like video games.
Hell yeah. I've actually been playing a lot of Songs of Six lately.
Songs of Six?
That. Yeah, it's kind of a city builder, empire manager thing. It's basically built from the ground up by a guy in his basement, so it's very convoluted. But that's what makes it fun.
Huh. When is this from? 2020.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Good stuff.
Warhammer people are very excited because they're getting some new games. There's going to be a Dawn of War game, kind of like an RTS, I guess. And then there's going to be a Warhammer, or a Total War 40K game, which I've played those before. Have you played those?
I have not. I had friends in college who did. They seemed to enjoy them. But I never played them myself.
I think you would like it. It's pretty fun. It's like a little bit stepping into the RTS realm where you can do some adjustments of your troops once the battle begins, but you don't have to do that. You could play the game without microing stuff, and you just kind of let stuff auto battle. But it seems pretty fun. Lots of different factions for it. And they have a bunch of different games, so maybe you like the high fantasy vibe, maybe you like something else. I think they have quite a few different formats for it. I like Warhammer 40K stuff too. I'm not really invested in it. Like, I don't have my own set of figurines and I don't play that, but the lore is really fun. It's one of my favorite pastimes. If I'm in an airport and I don't know what to do, maybe I don't want to get my book out and be committed to reading, I'll just open up like one of the fan wikis of Warhammer 40K and read about some faction. There's just so much stuff, you're never going to run out.
Well, a couple decades of accumulated lore will do that.
Well, cool.
Doing pretty well. You ready for bed?
Yeah, we went a little overtime. Ended up...
sorry.
No, it's good. We're kind of slowing down just because it was a relatively slow week, so sometimes they're kind of grasping for topics, but maps are very good time fillers, so I like maps.
Yeah, fun stuff. Nice, easy infographic.
Yeah. Well, very good. I issue you your weekly walk challenge once again.
I did walk today.
Nice. I'm trying to walk a decent bit too, just to break the sleep inertia when I wake up, get some sunlight in the eyes and so on, but very healthy thing to do.
I concur. That's good for me.
Well, very good. Thank you, chat, for your participation. Thank you, Agent Smith, for your time. We'll see you on the next episode of Whale Discussion with Agent Smith.
Yeah, thanks again. Always a privilege. Talk to you next time.
GG.